That is a reality. The fourth industrial revolution has become a reality.
The economy and the prices you're paying, and new evidence tonight that you're not imagining things. Prices are going up on everything from groceries to rent.
Disrupted into scenes of chaos.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
So bright like Lucifer, now I shine just like Jupiter.
That the faster you improve health, the faster family size goes down.
Welcome back, people. Welcome back. This is Face the Facts with Digital Negasi, and it's a very special episode because it's the Sunday night episode, and we're actually going to be changing the show name to Berean Facts due to this amazing synthesis of creative and beautiful intellectual conversation and discourse. I found that it would be amazing to do a regular Sunday special with this brother right here. I'm meeting a genuine show of character, a man structured with, discipline and principles that are necessary for the modern family and necessary for all families and really for our generation to really be able to get a peek into to see what's going on with some guidance and some love and some compassion. This is definitely the source to do that with, man. Berean Talk, I'm going to introduce you now. Welcome to the show. How you feeling, brother?
Man, you already know how I'm feeling, bro. I'm excited because we're here to face the facts. You know what I'm saying? What's going on, everybody? For those of you that don't know, my name is Christian Mosley. I'm a host of Berean Talk. I'm a husband. I'm a local activist in my community. I'm a co-founder of Chorus Community Foundation with Mr. Raheem Jones. And I'm just here to chop it up with my very good brother, Mr. Israel Negasi, here on Face the Facts this evening. And we're about to get right into it, man. We're about to get right into it.
My brother, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. And thank you for that perfect synopsis of how we can get to know you some more. And I want to make sure that people link out to his show. He has a personal subscribe channel you can go to. I personally enjoy watching this content. I personally enjoy engaging in this content. Berean Talk is the channel. Subscribe, like, share, and just see the topics he touch on. Get to see who he is for yourself, and kind of take that relationship a little bit further. If you like seeing him on this show, see what else he's got to talk about. He's got some interesting points to make. We are here after what would be commonly understood as the Super Bowl night.
Yep.
I don't really think I care to touch too much on what the show was about. And I've been hearing comments about the the halftime show and this and that, but we're not here for that. I don't know if you care to engage for that, but I mean, it's a Super Bowl night.
My team didn't win, so I don't care.
Who was you going for?
No, San Francisco is my team, so they got knocked out. So I wasn't paying attention. So I didn't even care. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, of course, congratulations to LA. Y'all got it. Ain't nothing else to say after that.
Fair enough. Well, this is again about talking about the underlying issues and the underlying reality that we're having to face come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and every other day of the week after today. So we figured you start off the day, the week right. You know, you start just, you know, you get your evening settled down, you're comfortable. You want to have some, you know, intellectual discourse, something to relax your mind, you know, help bring some sense into your mind and into your world. You know, you can sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation, engage if you want to. This is the platform to do that. And we're doing that. And this is a completely free talk. Like, this is for anybody to feel inspired by any piece of the content we bring up, because these are interesting subjects. These are interesting facts that we're bringing up. And we have the Berean discourse to take it upon. Now, give us one time the definition of that word Berean. One time for us.
So Berean, as I understand it, it comes from the book of Acts. It was a group of people that Paul, the apostle, had preached Saul the apostle had preached the good news to, and they were quoted as being of more noble character, because not only did they receive the message that Paul gave them, but they went back home and studied it to verify whether or not it was true. So the concept behind my show is not just talking about topics and trying to be factual, and it's not just about trying to be some woke space or just somewhere that talks, you know, with a big vocabulary or something like that. But it's a place where we can objectively just look at certain things that we've been told are true or may not be true, and then just objectively going, okay, yeah, we verified that what everybody said is correct. Or we can say that is verifiably false, and here is the evidence. And so who other for me to do that with than Mr. Face the Facts himself? I mean, it's like it's a match made in the heavens. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now.
One would say divinely inspired.
Divinely inspired. You feel me?
Absolutely. This is a divinely inspired show, y'all. This is the perfect way to inspire that. That's the perfect way to talk about that. This is a divinely inspired show. And we're just going to let divine inspiration take over, because that's facing reality does, is taking this on a level where it's getting into the deeper things and getting into the finer things of life. And how we discussed earlier, you know, the philosophical mindset and making peace with the reality that we have to face. You know, that's the power of the synthesis of this show, I think, is the ability to face the facts and talk about it with wisdom, the Berean way, and, you know, come up with you know, a solution at the end of the day, through conversation and through how the mainstream call it, through dialogue. But we're actually having productive conversation, because now we're sparking minds, you know, and everybody knows the power of sparking a mind. If you know how to ignite the right idea and ignite the right thought, you know, we might all inspire something in each other to make the right decisions to move forward in a increasingly interesting world. So with that being said, let's talk about the most interesting thing we discussed amongst the many interesting things that we discussed. Amongst the many interesting things we discussed. Now, I asked you earlier if it was too early to bring this out, but I'm going to ask you again. Do you think the world is ready for this conversation?
We'll see.
Do we have a solution for them if we bring this up?
I'm gonna be honest, no, I don't. Like, I'm willing to analyze what we're looking at, but I can't say for a fact, like, oh, okay, hey everybody,
You ain't got the answer, Sway.
got the answers. I really don't.
The answer, Sway.
Man, like, I don't know what to tell people. Like, for certain things, I'm cool with saying, like, I don't know what to tell you. I can tell you that such and such is about to go down, such and such is bad, but I may not be able to tell you anything outside of, for me, it's just hunkering down with what I know to be true and staying close to the Most High, staying close to my family. And then, you know, when Israel was in captivity, what God said, listen, get married, have kids, plant gardens, eat the fruit thereof, and y'all just, you know, make yourselves secure, make yourselves independent. And that's really all I could say about something like that, because you're talking about some of the most powerful governments in the world. And unless you're moving with a divine inspiration or a divine anointing in order to move in a certain way, you are one person against it's the United States. This is one of the most powerful governments in the world. You think that like they don't know, like, and have all the information that they need on you ever since, especially like we done had COINTELPRO and all these other things that have come out, and mass information sharing and stuff happening under the Obama administration. Like, for people to think that just like, oh, okay, hey, I posted this little thing. Have you ever seen this? People post these statements on their Facebook pages and just assume that Facebook's like, dang, we can't, she said that we can't take her information, dog. She put the thing on her page. Like, no, like they probably know what part of the house you sleep in. Like, it's very specific. It's very specific.
That Alexa in there. Alexa.
No, like I promise
listen
you.
to my every breath and thought. Like,
listen, when I found out it was the creepiest thing that ever happened to me, I think I was like 16. When you could go like, hey Siri, and you could wake up your phone. And I used to like sleep at night and I would play the Bible while I would sleep, but occasionally my phone would just turn on, and it would just like the mic would turn on, and it would freak me out, and I never knew why. And well, I knew why it freaked me out. I just never knew why it was happening. So, but like all that just kept happening over and over. I eventually like turned it off, and I was just like, that did that, and it told me it was doing that. I can't imagine what it's gotten on me, and I did it though. Like, that's a scary thought, man. So just know you've already been had. That's what I'm saying. Just know that they already got you. You just got to know that you'll be okay.
Man,
it's a very candid way of putting it.
I will say this on my end. Fuck all that. They can have whatever they want about me. They can take whatever they think they can take from me. Fuck all of that. You ain't gonna see me without these hands. It's not gonna happen. You're not gonna see me without these hands. And I promise you, it's not going down like that. It's not going down like that. Ain't no fucking. This is the thing. It's gonna be a lot of tribulation. It's gonna be a lot of persecution. I understand that. But you remember what Moses did to Egypt? Not Moses. You remember what the Most High did through Moses to Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world at that time. Now, I know the idea of war may have changed over time for people because they think that technology in these days are more superior. So we feel like, whatever they had going on in Egypt, they were just fighting with swords and sticks and this and that. No, they were the fuck not. No, what they were not the fuck not. They was not playing with just spear chuckers. They were not just spear chuckers out there, people. They were playing with fucking technology. The Ark of the Covenant. Let's take this biblically. That shit was so radioactive. If you touched it, you died instantly.
It wasn't just radioactive. It was also electric. Like, you couldn't go into water with the thing. Like, it was
not a joke. That thing literally emancipated entire nations. Removed them out the fucking, just boom. Now, the reason why we have technology today is to match the power that they were playing with back then. You don't think they've seen whole cities explode before?
And we're not even close. That's the thing. We're not even really close to what we think that power is. That's the thing.
And you're
right. And when people say
he's almighty, or that's why he's the most high.
Exactly. So like when people tell me like different words, they just like to use stuff out of the Bible and don't know what it means. So they're like, oh my God, the Shekinah glory. I was like, no, it didn't. And they'd be like, well, how you know you weren't there? I'd be like, because you're alive. Like if that presence of the Most High was around you, you would have to die. That's why like everybody thinks it's kind of like these just boring rituals. But there's a reason Leviticus has got like 30 chapters on what the priest is supposed to do and not do in that temple. How you wash, you're supposed to do this. Then you put the blood on this earlobe and then this toe, and then you're supposed to take the shoes off and do this. It's for a reason. So like this whole like our understanding of what holiness is supposed to look like is so skewed because in America we've been told that it is okay to have a casual relationship with God because he's your bro. He's your, he's
He's just like your youth pastor. It ain't no problem, bud. Like
this. And I'm not saying, and that's not to say that God doesn't have grace and mercy on us all the time. That's not what I'm saying.
He's been merciful.
It's our understanding of who he is. Like when you look in the Bible and you look at how people prayed, they weren't doing that because they were like, oh, somebody gonna write this down and this is gonna be fire like 3,000 years from now. Like that's not what was happening. They were like, I understand who you are, therefore I have to address you as who I understand you to be. So when they're like, the provider, you are the protector, you are the this, you are the that, that's because that's who they understood him to be. So for me, it's like it's not a I would say it's not that difficult to understand, but I feel like we've oversimplified some things when it comes to him in terms of the Most High, but it just even the supernatural in general. Like there's certain things. It's just like, nah, it's not a game out here. Like this is real. This is very real.
I sent you those videos a while back. Those YouTube on the playlist. I know you probably still have some catching up to do with them because it's a little, how do you feel about the information so far?
It's interesting, but it's kind of like it kind of confirms some things that I've kind of thought about before. Because some of it was kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because if I were to follow, let's say the different things about like frequencies and what's happening with like the celestial bodies, if you will, in the heavens, it's like, well, yeah, because you can go back and look and say, wait, well, yeah, if the scripture says this, and this, then if we follow that to its logical conclusion, then yeah, that makes sense. It's like it was more cool and confirming for me than anything. I think when people are kind of like scared of kind of looking into that, it can be the unknown can be scary, and I think that's just as human beings, just like something that's outside of your norm can interfere. Me, it was just like I know I don't know everything, but I was just like, okay, this doesn't seem to violate scripture, and it also kind of something I was kind of already thinking, and then they put it all together, and I was like, okay, cool, yeah, all right, let's keep it rolling. Like that's it.
And that's the power of an open mind, man, because that's how wisdom speaks, because it may not necessarily be with traditional understanding of things. Like the common understanding of things in scripture is not the common understanding as it was 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. That was a different language, a different culture, a different reality. They were seeing shit you couldn't even possibly explain in English. There is no English word to define what they, like, coming from, my parents are Ethiopian. Coming from Ethiopia, there's certain words that they can't necessarily translate in English because it doesn't have the same effect. And Ethiopian, the Amharic language, is a Semitic, a proto-Semitic cousin of the Hebrew language.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So they have Semitic ties. There's certain words in the Ethiopian language that match with the Hebrew language, and I'm just like, dang. Oh, yeah, wow. It's really deep. Okay. It is. This is the traditional Ethiopic language. And that's where Amharic comes from, Oromo, all these different, tribes that come from these different, sects of land and stuff like that. But it all stems from Ge'ez. That's what they said the book of Enoch was written in. That's man, dope. So it's like, I'm reading this stuff and it's just like, oh my goodness. Like, if they could depict any clearer, with the words that they were trying to use in their language, because their language was very clear. But the way it gets transcribed and gets mungled around in this English and these popes and these different, regimes that are switching up scripture and telling us what is and what it's not, and Protestantism, and then all these different sects that came out of that. There's so much confusion on what this one book is saying. This one book has caused a fracture in all of Christianity, and it's like, we don't even know what the hell we're talking about no more. We don't.
Nobody. Nobody does, man. No, like you got to think about it. If you're in a religion, because Christianity seems to be the only, like, one of the few religions that I've seen that does this. Christianity goes, okay, we believe in the Bible.
But not all of it.
Not all of it, but then they're not gonna say that yet. But then you're like, okay, we believe in the Bible, and be like, all right, cool. Then they convert you. Then they tell you to start in like the Book of Matthew. They're like, okay, you just became a believer, start the Book of Matthew, and it's like, you don't even know who you just pledged your allegiance to. You don't. And so I know people that have like only like skimmed parts of the Old Testament. So I'll bring stuff up that like feels like to me should be common knowledge, and they're like, "Wait, it says that?" I'm like, do you not know who you're connected to? And it's disturbing because I remember I was at a Bible study not too long ago. Shout out to Family Fellowship Worship Center, Jonathan Davenport, my guy, and the whole K Nation. They invited me over to one of the gatherings, and one of the guys who was in there made a really great point. And he was like, statistically, Christians are extremely scripturally illiterate. There's this
the main ones. I don't know what the nothing.
And the thing is, it's like we're one of the few, because like I don't meet many people that are in, let's say, the Nation of Islam, or people that are just, you know, Muslims of different sects that are not extremely proficient in the Quran. I've yet to meet people that are like religious Jews that are not very proficient in the Torah. You don't see that too often. It's not until you get to like Christianity, and it's really like Western Christianity. And I'm not gonna say this covers everybody, because there's a lot of Christians I know that they are raised knowing that word front to back. But all too often there is this, well, my pastor said ... And it's like, what did God say though? Like, I don't care what your pastor said. That's a man. He's gonna die and become dust just like me. That's not who I'm worshiping. Tell me what the source said. And that's why Israel never really had too many excuses, because when the law was written, when Moses wrote the law, and it was there for everybody, and then there were different times of the year where all of Israel would hear the law read out loud, from children, everybody, men, women, everybody. God has made it in such a way, it's like there are no excuses. I've made it very clear to you what I want you to do, what I don't want you to do, what will make me bless you, what will make me curse you, what will earn extra favor, and what is a delight in my eyes, and something that I find an abomination. He makes it very clear. It is not hard. It's just like any good parent. A good parent will lay out what the rules in the house are, the do's and don'ts. There is no, I've yet to hear a good parent go to their kids, all right, guys, you're my children. I just need you to love me. And the kids are like, all right, how do we do that? And you're like, I just need you to love me and don't do bad things. And it's like, that's so like vague. Like that doesn't, but that's how a lot of people are living their lives spiritually. And it's disturbing. So people will say like, oh, okay, you got to do righteousness. And you'll be like, okay, what is righteousness? And they were like, well, doing things that please God. And they'll be like, okay, what pleases God? And they'll be like, well, loving your neighbor and you're loving him. And I'm like, all right, how do you do that? Those are the two laws that the rest of the law hangs on, right? So how do we do that? And then it's just like this weird awkwardness where they can't get specific at that point, because it's like, well, I don't know. And then on the flip side, I'm like, okay, what are the bad things? What are the things I'm not supposed to do? And then they'll go, okay, well, whatever was said by this person in this book or this person in this book, instead of going back to the laws, the actual rule book. So you got people that are like, well, don't eat meat with blood in it. Don't have, don't do anything sexually immoral, and don't worship idols.
They had a few.
And then I'm like,
a few laws in there. Please don't let me cut you off, because I'm gonna start going off on a rant. Go ahead.
oh, you good. But like, so somebody will say that, you'd be like, okay, what is considered sexual immorality?
Can we talk about that? Let's talk about that. It's the Sunday night special. Let's talk about that. What is sexual immorality? Because this is a huge problem for every community right now. Is trying to figure out how to be sexually moral or sexually. What is sexual morality at the end of the day? What does that even look like? Because right now our women are turning into men. They're competing in men's sports. You know, they're leading the. I mean, they're, you know, marrying each other. They're you know, I mean, it's a lot of different ideas of what sexuality looks like, and it's evolved since, you know, I mean, our generation kind of saw a smoother transition than the previous generations, because, you know, they've been around longer than us, and they've seen it go from being, you know, somewhat, you know, not talked about to freaking bam, it's gonna be in your face. Like, all right, we're gonna have, you know,
They got their own.
so, you know, and a lot of churches are getting in trouble now because they're teaching, you know, if you are preaching a hate speech on sexuality on a gay level, if you're talking about, I mean, we still have enough common sense to know that fucking an animal is wrong for now. You know what I'm saying? Like, the way the world is going, we only have that sense for now. It's going to be a matter of time before they start legalizing animal rights to marry. Well, you know, they have emotions to love. You know, that's what it's turning into. And, you know, they've already started turning pedophiles into what they call minor attracted persons. That's the official narrative on that now. But then if you go back in history, I mean, what's considered back in history, what's considered today to be pedophilia back in the day was normal. It's 30, 40, 50-year-olds. My grandmother, she was married at 14 years old to a 26-year-old, 27-year-old. And that was normal. And that's maybe a generation, that's 2 generations above me. That's not even above, that's in my lifetime I'm seeing that happen. So that's still within the realm of possibility for a lot of people's minds. And I mean, we saw R. Kelly get locked up for that. So it's like, we're starting to look at things like, what exactly is normal when it comes to sexuality? Because you can just change your organs now. That's what our children are being taught. All you got to do is just change your organs, or, you know, take some pills, and you could be whatever the fuck you want to be. How do you even have that conversation when it's like being demonized to say, and that's for the, you know, the lost world, Jurassic Park over there. It's Jurassic Park over there, lost world completely. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even talking about Jurassic Park right now. I'm talking about within our own, you know, Christian communities, you know, because this Christians debating this topic and wondering, you know, we should allow gays to marry. We should allow this to be okay. Sex before marriage, is that okay? Sex with multiple partners, is that okay? What they would call fornication, or, you know, different premarital sex practices, or even orgies, or this and that. The Bible does specifically forbid about a majority of these things, a majority. And the stuff that's kind of, you know, getting past people is the concept that there were instances where, now I'm not advocating for this. This is just what I'm reading in scripture. There are instances where prostitution was completely legal and not even banned or not even talked down upon or nothing. Samson went into a prostitute way before he met Delilah, and there was no consequence to his power whatsoever. He was still swinging them locks like it was nothing, still taking down armies and everything, still completely following Nazarene laws and everything. But he was having sex with prostitutes, kicking it. I'm not advocating for this. Neither am I a participant in this activity. Let me make that clear for the record. But it is a reality for people throughout history, but it's considered demonized in modern Christianity. And why is that the case? And then we also have this concept of, you know, there should be no daughters, you know, made whores among the children of Israel. That much needs to be very, very much clear. But there's also this concept of, again, like the age gap. What's a normal age gap level before, you know, a woman becomes a woman, and this and that, and what can she do with? There's so many things that conflict with old moral law in the Torah, that conflicts with a lot of the ideology in modern Christianity. You know what I'm saying? But there was a lot of wild shit going on back there, like in public. Like Paul had to write a whole letter to Greece to was it the Thessalonians, to tell the children to stop, you know, hooking up with their moms and their dads, you know, wives and stuff like that. Like, it was a common thing out there, and it was like, yo, chill with the sexual immorality. chill with the shit. You don't need to be sleeping with your moms. Like,
I think it was Thessalonica, because he was like, y'all doing stuff even the pagans don't do.
Right.
Like, y'all wild. Like, what? Y'all doing what? Like,
you doing what to your what? Like,
but I think that just kind of goes to show, like, I think to kind of. Oh wait, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
that's I told you I was gonna go on a rant, but I'm opening up a whole dialogue right now because sexual morality, like, there's so much confusion on that, because right now it's common, like, what's common in social media right now, what's common in modern ideology, at least in the West, is this concept that everybody cheats and everybody's supposed to cheat. That's just how the social dynamics works. That's just how life works. Or that's just, I'm on social media a lot to collect the news, to collect what's going on in the culture. I'm seeing what's going on with the world. And that's what's going on in the propaganda with these kids' videos. It's just like, oh, oop, it's cute that I cheat. And it's different, concepts on what a man is and what a woman is and how they should project themselves, like, as kids. And it's like, okay, growing up, and it's like the music that they're listening to, it's like we had a good mix of stuff growing up in the 90s. Nowadays, if it's not about ass, it's about murder, and if it's not about murder, then it's about, I don't know, getting high. Like, what are they talking about these days?
I think so. In order to kind of even figure that out, you got to go back to, like, all right, who do you belong to, right? So anytime I've had the conversations with people, like, on the outside about this conversation of, like, well, okay, sexuality and different things, I always try to start with, all right, who do you belong to? Because if you don't even belong to the same God that I do, then the conversation is going to kind of stop there, or I'm not really even going to try to convince you of anything, because we don't even have the same standard for operating in the world. That's number one. But also number two, you got to realize, like, even the things like you were talking about, like, some stuff was acceptable, some stuff wasn't acceptable. So I would say this: there's a difference in the Bible. There's, like, commandments and written instruction, and then there's a narrative, which is not necessarily instruction. It's just saying this is what happened. So when you have the situation with Samson, it's not like the Most High told him to go get with the prostitute. That's just what he did. Now, the reason being was, the reason he didn't lose his strength was because the whole vow was, if his hair gets cut, there's consequences for his hair getting cut. But the thing is, so people focus on that, and they just like, oh, okay, he got away with being with the prostitute. No, bro got his eyes gouged out because he decided to allow his genitals lead him into a direction of which he had no business being in. So I always say it like this: when people say certain things like, okay, a lot of the patriarchs of our faith, Isaac didn't have more than one wife, but Abraham and Jacob having all these wives and concubines and different things. And I'll be like, and then, so you got a lot of people that are like, okay, well, what about polygamy? Because a whole bunch of people in the Bible did it, which is a fair argument, right? So here's what you got to look at. Number one, there is a commandment that. Wait. So that's absolutely true. So there's commandments in Torah that give precedence for when a man is married to more than one woman. But then there's also commandments that say you are not supposed to take your wife's sister as a rival wife. Now, some people have interpreted that as you don't get two women from the same family and marry them, because that could be, issues, which patriarchs, some of them did that, and you saw what happened. But some people have interpreted it as, because Israel is described as a family, when it says sister, it's just talking about bringing in another woman into that marriage because of the things that it could produce. But just because God makes provision to talk about how to correct something doesn't mean we were necessarily supposed to do it in the first place. So like when they talks about all these sacrifices that you had to make for like this sin and this sin and this sin, it's not saying to go do the sin. It's just like, nah, when you mess up, this is what you got to do to make it right. That's it. So when we start getting into this like sexuality conversation, when I'm talking to another believer, I'm like, okay, so there's rules and stipulations to this, which means that, so like when people say, especially if you're talking with like a kingdom mindset, shall we say, and somebody talks to me about, okay, what about having safe sex? Safe sex is married sex, point blank, period. And reason being is with people that are actually in tune spiritually, whether they worship the Most High or Dagon or whatever, everybody has this understanding that sex is more than just a physical biological function. It's spiritual, which is why if you pay attention in the Bible, when it talks about when Israel would go into idolatry, or these other nations were going into idolatry in some shape or fashion, there's some form of sexuality or sexual conduct being displayed during these worship services. That's because sex is a form of worship. People don't understand that. It doesn't mean that you in there singing songs and praising or whatever. There are certain things that you do in the spiritual realm that is submitting yourself to a spiritual being, period. That's why the things that you eat are important. That's why the things that you listen to are important. That's why the things that you wear, the way that you present yourself, the reason that we don't talk a certain way, the reason that we don't go and do certain things is because being obedient is an act of worship. When you look up what worship means, it's an act of submission. Anytime you see in scripture when somebody says, when it, when it says somebody went and worshipped, or somebody, saw something or saw something God did and they worshiped, it always says what they do. They fell to their knees. You're in it's an act of submission. So when it comes to so when it, so when it comes to your sexuality, regardless of what you think about it, see, this is the thing. People think that the spiritual realm only operates with your permission. It's not how it works. It's going to do what it does without your permission, just like how gravity works. It's like if I were to, if I'm going to pick up, this can right here and drop it, it's going to drop regardless of whether or not I believe in gravity or not. So we have these things called soul ties. You have these things called, like, all of these different things. There's a reason why, like, think about it like this. Especially like when you look into like things like Satanism and all these different occult things. And then when you look in like to the elites and all the other perverted things that they do or whatever. If their whole goal is to worship this dark entity in order to get power, they're not going to do something that doesn't help them get power. So when you look at different things and you see like, okay, they're very particular about, who they sleep with or how they do it and different things, that means there's something happening there, right? In the same way, God, see, a lot of people don't understand this. You can worship the Most High with your sexuality by submitting it to him and then using it in the ways that he tells you to. So, like, just to give my own little like history, right? My parents at a young age kind of taught me and my younger brother like what sex was about. They weren't just the type of parents that were just like, don't have sex till you get married. Because eventually, because most people have been taught that way, you're gonna like, well, why? And of course they can't really tell you. You're like, well, I'm gonna go sow my seeds. Like that's what people do.
You're right. You're right.
But when they explained it to me, they were like, no, this is a spiritual ritual that will tie you to somebody for the rest of your life, regardless of whether or not you're in a relationship with them. There are certain, even biologically, there are certain chemicals that are released that will bind you to somebody for the rest of your life, which is why every single person on planet Earth who has had sexual experiences, you always remember the first one. That is the one that is imprinted on your mind. You remember the smells, you remember what you were looking at, you remember what you heard, like all of that. There's a reason for that. Because that's supposed to be like when women have babies and it's like those first 24, 48, even 72 hours are so vital because there's certain biological and spiritual things happening that bind you to that person for the rest of your life, right?
I will say this.
So
I will say I definitely noticed a difference between making love and just having sex with somebody, because I remember in much more detail what I did making love than I did the first time. Because I guess you could say I dabbled in the social environment. You know what I'm saying? I've dabbled the waters, you know what I'm saying? I've tested the lake a few times, but that's, you know, in my younger days. But I'll say the first time I really made love, I remember that in greater detail than I could say I remember any of my previous experiences, to be honest with you. And I got a pretty good memory. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I've seen there is definitely a lot of spiritual moments happening in these, you know, and as it took me some time to grow as a man spiritually first, before I learned to, you know, respect my sexuality a little bit more. Cause, you know, I was just, you know, kicking it at, you know, females were just around, and so it is what it is. But I mean, as I grew a little bit, you know, I'm in school, you know, I'm trying to, like, you know, really focus on what I really want to do with life. And it's like, you know, I'm getting closer to the Most High at the same time. There's a lot of spiritual things happening that's waking me up. I decided to go celibate, and it's not because it's like, I didn't think at the time it was wrong or anything. I just knew that that's not what I needed to focus on. And I was like celibate for a good, like, 3-something years, before I could say I actually made love, you know? And, I'll say that to say, in that time that I was clearing my head and clearing my thoughts, I did see a big change in what I wanted in life, as far as, you know, where my thoughts were focused on, and how that connects with the sexual identity, because it's like your thoughts and your dick are connected. I would say, like, that's a very strong relationship there. And it's almost like a compass pointing you, you know what I'm saying? Like how you say, don't let your genitals lead you in the wrong path. That's what I've understood, like, you know, on this spiritual journey. Like, the genitals hold this very special power on both ends, and it is a very sacred, you know, space, a temple even, and it's been very much disrespected, and desensitized to the sacredness of it, to the point where it's, you know, just there's no real value beyond the pleasure. For most people these days, at least that's how it's shown in entertainment. And the spiritual side of things that you and your mother are discussing, it's like, or you and your family discussing, is you know, that's a reality. That's a conversation I've had with my folks, and with my mother especially. And you know, she was a little bit more of like, you know, the don't do anything before marriage. So I was like, okay, you know, I tried my best. But, I'm glad that I took that time to clear my head and have that moment of celibacy, and like really focus on what's important spiritually and physically, even, you know, watching what I eat and everything like that. Because it's like, I'm still a baby back then, like trying to figure things out. But it's just like, I just knew that there was just something different about being clean in that sense. But at the same time, there is this conversation about the Song of Solomon now, and there is also this conversation you brought up earlier, and not to cut you off, because I know you were saying something before this, but you were making that point about there was never really an instance where God demanded a man to deal with a prostitute. But I believe, I don't remember which prophet it was. Was it Ezra?
Oh, you're thinking about hold on. Not Obadiah.
Maybe it was Obadiah.
No, it wasn't Obadiah. It was Hosea.
That's
Gomer and
that's exactly who it was. You're right. Right. I hate that they call them minor prophets, because now I had to, like, you know. But that was an interesting example as to how that was a direct command. Like, you know, hey, look, I need to make a point right now about the spiritual condition of my nation. Like, I want you to see what it's like, what I got to deal with, you know, dealing with an idolatrous nation. You know what I'm saying? Like, in most cases, you know, whoredom is whoredom at the end of the day is spiritual idolatry and even physical idolatry. It's like there's a looseness that goes with that on the spiritual level, that you just don't have even control over your own mental. You don't have control of your own mind, because it's, you know, whatever that idol is controls it. And I mean, we're in unprecedented amounts of idolatry. We are literally in we are steeped in idolatry. Like,
it's It's so deep. Most people don't even understand how deep it is. Like, oh my God. Like, that's a whole nother conversation we can get into. It's wait, man, like if people really understood what was going on, and I'm not even talking about like I'm sure everybody's met the people that's like the what my boy Paul, shout out to Paul Eilip, he would call being paganoid, which is like thinking everything's pagan. Like, oh, soda can
Man, it's a fucked up situation. It really is.
but it's like I'm not one of those people necessarily, but I am like
Shit,
everything way more pagan.
Everything is pagan. I ain't fucking fuck your Christmas, fuck your Valentine's Day, fuck your Thanksgiving, fuck your fucking 4th of July, fuck all that shit. Like I ain't running with none of that. Like I'm not bowing down to nothing but the Most High. Fuck all of that. I don't care about none of that. And I know that these things come from pagan rituals from back in the day. These are pagan rituals, people. They just softened it up because we're not out here sacrificing goats and people anymore. But it's still the same fucking ritual, people.
Honestly, I don't even believe that because the real ones be doing that.
But back then it was more of a city activity. Like, you know, that was a publicly understood thing. From my understanding of history, Rome was a publicly pagan nation. Everybody was in that shit. They were just like, man, as far as I know, maybe I don't.
Here's the thing. America's a publicly pagan nation.
It's like discreet, though. It's pagan. It's like discreetly paganistic. It's like they don't even know they're being idolatrous. They don't even know it. They really, really feel like they're praying to God right now. Like, that's the problem.
Nah, it's not even that. It's just because it's out in the open. It's if you're not desensitized to it, it's very obvious. I think that's the problem with it, because it's not as, because before, that's why I used to think for a while it was just like, oh my God, it's so discreet. But then when you think about it, right? Okay, let's think about this. Supposedly, United States of America is supposedly Christian nation, okay? Now let's think about this right here. Every time you see an American flag, what is on the top of that thing? On the very top. It's on the top of the flag, almost every time you see it. The golden eagle, right? Now, that's not just like, oh, okay, it's this decoration. Like that's part of the thing. It's part of the symbol. It's very important. Now, I remember reading somewhere about graven images, but for some reason, that's important. Okay. So then we move forward. You've been to Washington, D.C.? Go to Washington, D.C. It looked...
Providence Hospital, Washington, D.C. That's where I was born. July 23rd, 1992.
Shout out to the 202. You feel me? But, but like, nah, like, yeah, you've been to D.C. It looks like the Pantheon. Like, okay, you got the Jefferson Memorial over here. You got Abraham Lincoln's statue over here. You got a statue of this soldier. You got a statue of these soldiers. You got a statue of this thing, this graven image here. You got and for some reason, everything has Roman architecture.
Every time I drive through there, I know I'm driving through fucking modern Rome. That's how I genuinely feel, bro. I'm riding around, because like even the way they light it up at night, when you see these things light up at night, how they have all the spotlights on them, they have them lit up like the temples back in Rome, the destroyed ones. Yeah. And I'm just like, damn, they really highlighting. Like, I understand these are, you know, federally respected buildings, but check this out. I really did the research on this shit. Like the temple stuff, you're right. The Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury, how they were using these temples is not how we understand temples to work. These weren't just like places where people went to go congregate like in church. This is something I was researching heavy, how these temples worked. The Temple of Saturn was literally the national currency, or the national treasury. That's all it was. They understand the sacredness of money, and they used to print the money and the gold coins and the silver coins that they used to print the nation, because back then they were using real gold and real silver because the shit was real. They had real money back then, and they were going through inflation. So you know what they did? They were mixing the gold with bronze and copper, and then it started getting cheaper and cheaper. That's how inflation happened back in the day. Now we're using paper. We're not using gold and silver no more. We ran out of that shit. We're not using that no more. They stole all that shit. Now it's just paper. And they're inflating that and they're stuffing it up with the verbatim copper and clay, because they know that we can't stand. And that's how you explain Daniel's prophecy. The nation mixed with iron and clay. And that's what our money is fucking made of these days. The coins.
I can see
you see what I'm saying? Because think about it. Back then it was the nation of gold. They had nothing but an abundance of gold. Back in the day, gold wasn't in abundance. Then it was the Silver Age, the Daniel's prophecy, the beasts, the kingdoms that rise out of the earth after Babylon. But long story short, they're mixing. Look, back in the day, Saturn's temple was just the U.S. or the Roman treasury, where they minted all of their gold and silver coins. That's where they minted their money and distributed it to the nation. It was their Federal Reserve. We don't call these things the Temple of Saturn no more. We don't call them the Temple of Zeus or the Temple of Apollo these days no more. We just call them, the White House or the Capitol. And you could see the Capitol's already lit up with all different kinds of idolatry, everything from the imaging on the walls to the hieroglyphics is clear. They're leaving us the hieroglyphics.
They got the rotunda where like George Washington is literally like he's deified, and it's like all of these angelic beings and stuff. And it's like,
I can't fathom what kind of man that really was, because it's like, how in school they taught us that George Washington was this hero of the nation and he was just this lone trooper against the British government. The way they deify him, I don't know if it really was like that, because Britain still owns us. It's not like that relationship is over, and they're deifying the man that resisted their invasion or their colonization or their taxation, I should say, because they were the colonizers. It just don't.
But I think it's that, but I think people just don't even really realize like what the roots of this nation is. Like, okay, I'll give you a prime example: the Capitol building, right? That is where legislation takes place. That is where some of the most historical things that ever happened in this nation, some of the most powerful, some of the most transformative things that ever happened in this nation take place on those grounds, right? Okay. When the cornerstone, not just a brick, the cornerstone, that's symbolic. It's talked about in scripture, but that's just known in architecture. When the cornerstone was laid, George Washington.
We're not doing a shout out to the Masons, right?
No, we definitely not doing a shout out to the Masons, but like, it just is what.
The actual stonemasons, not no.
Shout out to the brick.
We like the stones. The stones.
No, yeah, shout out to the people that be put that stuff together. I've laid brick before. That junk is not easy. So much respect to y'all. But when it comes to like that, right? When they put down the cornerstone for this building, for the Capitol, George, and now I'm not even lying. Anybody can go look this up on the Capitol website, the .gov website. It is on there for every tourist that ever wants to get regular information on there. It's on there. George Washington laid that cornerstone of the Capitol during a Masonic ceremony. And if you know anything about Freemasonry, it is Satanism. So you're like, people don't understand how deep this stuff is. George Washington was a human trafficker. It wasn't just like, oh, he owned, like, and I'm so sick of this argument because it's a very spineless cop out to admitting that things have just been evil since forever. People say things like, well, slavery was, that was the thing of the day, and that's just what they did. And, you can't expect for them to think it's wrong. Okay, if you want to do that, then I need you to keep that same energy about abortion, because that's just what people do today, right? And the fact of the matter is, anybody with some common sense should be able to say, it was wrong then, and wicked then, and abomination then, and it is now. And the reason he was doing it was because he was a Satanist. But those are the heroes of our country. It was real funny to me seeing Candace Owens, and I'm only saying her because she was the one that went viral for doing this. It's real funny to me how Candace Owens, she did a whole video going in on George Floyd and his character and how horrible of a human being he was and his criminal record and all that, and talking about black people are basically these foolish degenerates. And I'm paraphrasing. She didn't actually say that, but these foolish degenerates that promote and celebrate criminals and people with bad character and everything else. But the United States of America, most of your heroes are human traffickers. Most of your heroes are rapists. Most of your heroes are murderers and committers of genocide. Thomas Jefferson is a known rapist and human trafficker. So is George Washington.
Wow. Wake up, people.
Like people, but nobody wants to go into that. But then they want to excuse it and say, well, they did all these other good things. It's like, whoa. Y'all don't do that with us though. See, when it's a Negro, it's always this one note: you do something bad, therefore you're a bad person. When it's with people that are a little bit more lighter than me, then it gets complicated because they might have they didn't give enough hugs when they were a child, or maybe they didn't understand this social phenomenon. And it's like, nah, we're all human beings. We're all human beings. We're not necessarily just monoliths. So like but that just kind of goes back to like the purpose of what you do on your show and what I do on my show, which is facing the facts and being somebody that's just going to objectively look back and just be like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm not saying that the Constitution isn't a brilliant document. It's absolutely brilliant. That doesn't mean that Thomas Jefferson isn't a monster. Okay, George Washington might have had some incredible leadership skills and maybe even military skills. Doesn't mean that he's not a scumbag. Doesn't mean that he's not a creep, that he spent his dying days searching for this slave that left his plantation.
Wow.
A young woman. He spent his dying days looking for this woman slave. And we know. Now, there's speculations about it, but if I could put two and two together, you're talking about a powerful Caucasian white man who is chasing after his woman slave, who is willing to spend abnormal amounts of time to personally go look for her rather than just sending slave catchers. Tells me you got a pretty intimate connection with that person.
Right.
That wasn't like.
That's crazy. Didn't hear that story. They didn't teach us that at school.
They won't. But that's the thing. Like even with like Abraham Lincoln, he's considered the great emancipator. Nobody talks about how he wrote loopholes in the Emancipation Proclamation. Nobody talks about how there's a loophole in the 13th Amendment. Nobody talks about how he gave reparations to slave owners in Washington, D.C. before he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. And if you want to go look that up, it's called the Compensated Emancipation Act of, I want to say 1861 or 1862. It is in the government archives, .gov website. You can go look it up. He gives out.
One more time, what's it called?
It's called the Compensated Emancipation Act of either 1861 or 1862, but I know it's before 1863. Emancipation. Yep. So now
I gotta read that again.
here's
My mic
the
was cut off. Let me make sure the people heard that. So
No, you good?
I just pulled up the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862. It says on April 16th, 1862, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act became law, originally sponsored by Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts. The act freed slaves in the District of Columbia and compensated owners up to $300 for each and free person. So, I mean, they could have invested that into a new business and turned that into what we know today as General Mills or some bullshit like that. GE, General Electric or some shit like that. And was like, hey, we got a brand new way to capture your ass now. Like,
Now, here's the cold part though, right? So just to make that real for the audience, because for a lot of people, when we talk about like money and different things during that time period, we'll say $100 for this, $300 for that, and we kind of think like, oh, okay, that's nothing. You got to adjust for inflation. So $300 per slave today, that's $10,000 a head.
damn, I didn't even think about
it.
Woo! That's not even getting into the economics for real. Oh, you right. Damn.
Wait. So it's approximately, I think it's approximately $10,161 if I did the math correctly, which means now you know the type of people that bought slaves. So it does kind of like pain me like a little bit, like when I watch black people just blanketly just angry at white people, because it's like all white people weren't responsible for the same things. It's like I love the way that Dick Gregory put this. He was like, there are some white people that couldn't help you even if they liked you. Like even if they loved you to death, they don't have the power and the resources you think they do in order to do certain things. But when you start doing your history and looking into these different families and corporations, and you look into, families like, the Quaker Oats family exploiting the woman that played Nancy Green, the woman that was the real life personification of Aunt Jemima, how they exploited her, and her family is not seeing the fruits of her labor generations later, even though she made them multi-billionaires. You got to look into families like the Rockefellers, who started, it was a Jewish family that started in the slave trade down south. Nobody wants to talk about
all
that.
of both, they don't had to sponsor.
And the fact that they changed their names to Rockefeller, because that's not their original family name.
What's the original name? Do you remember the original family name?
I cannot remember it off the top of my head right now, but I know it was changed.
Out of the 13 families, I only remember maybe like 2 of them. And I know the Orsini family, the Borgias, they still have their family line going.
Yep. Borgia or Borgia,
yep. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, that's what it is. The Rothschilds.
The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Those are huge.
Yep.
So my point being is, like, when it comes to us and what we've had to go through as a people here, like, this isn't nothing light. And so, kind of going back to what you're talking about, they don't tell us this stuff in school. Of course they don't. Like, you can't. It's funny, like, the more that it's funny how Republicans will, like, I should say, like, far right-wing conservatives will say that this growing hate for America is because people are just, this is an idolatrous sentiment in and of itself, but to suggest that because people are becoming anti-American, it means they're becoming anti-God. That's a whole nother thing I could get into. But the fact of the matter is, they made it in such a way that when people are like that means that you're doing something bad. When in reality, any freedom-loving person, any person with some common sense, anybody that has some empathy, anybody that's, especially if you're connected to the Most High, when you go back and objectively look into American history, you are like, oh, this is a hellhole. I have some of the most conservative people you'd ever meet in your life. Far right-wing conservatives, white, love them to death. That I've been able to, who are willing to just objectively look at truth, who I've sat down and showed them some of the information that I have, and they're like, this changes my view of everything that I was taught growing up. And it's not like I made them out to be necessarily a bad person. It's just like, nah, listen, go look this up, check this out, just get back with me. And they come back and it's like a deer in headlights. It's like, I didn't know. But then the cold part about it is, you don't have to know in a lot of cases. We do. Because if you can't make sense of all of this that's going on, you either sell out or it drives you crazy.
That's the unfortunate truth about America. And I think we've seen a lot of films touching on these subjects. We've seen a lot of songs touching on these subjects. We've seen a lot of politicians touch on these subjects. We've seen a lot of outspoken individuals like ourselves speaking on these subjects. It is going to drive us crazy. It's like, no matter how much more truth we get, it does drive us a little bit crazy because of how, like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, just kind of like that innocence of kind of like wondering, why would anybody want to go out of their way to be that evil? You know what I'm saying? And why would anybody want to go out of their way to be that, is money really worth it like that? Like, is it really worth it that much? It can't be just money. It has to be something deeper. It's not just money. It has to be, because it's like, there's no rational way for a man or woman created in the image of the Creator, created in the image of the Most High, and we are taught that He is a benevolent, good, and loving Creator. How could He design such wickedness? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, there's no way that this makes logical sense. Something happened to you, and you really, 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 really need to lash out for whatever reason, because this ain't normal how crazy things are. Like, it's not normal in the sense of human rationality. You know what I'm saying? What did you have to go through to become a monster like this? to be the human trafficker that you are, to be the, you know, the rapist that you are, to be the murderer that you're like, what did you know what I'm saying? If you come from an affluent family, if you come from a decent situation, what drives you to need to do that? You're not trying to survive. You got money.
That's why, I mean, that's why the word says that the love of money is the root of all evil. And it's not, because people try to make that seem like, oh, it's a verse against, you know, being wealthy or anything like that.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
There was plenty in the Bible that was stacked. Abraham was like rich. Jacob was rich. Solomon and David and all of these, there was the rich young ruler. Like, there was people that was getting money.
Man, it was, they had their own country. They were a wealthy nation at one point. I mean, like they everybody was living comfortable and free and owned all their shit. They weren't paying taxes to none of that. But on top of that, I mean, it says in scripture, this is a scripture that I really love reading because it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, it says that if you are a man and you're not providing for your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. You see what I'm saying? You are expected to be providing. You're expected to be wealthy. You're expected to be able to be in a position where you can take care of people. That's the expectation if you're going to be a believer.
It's that, but I think it's also like, even when you think about the way that, because the Most High is such a freaking genius. The way that he situated Israel, it's the trade capital of the world. Because in order to get to any part, like actual nation of Israel, not that little Zionist state that's the size of New Jersey.
Where we talking? What piece of real estate you talking about?
We're talking about the whole thing. We're talking about like what the little piece, but we're also talking about parts that would encompass like Afghanistan and Iraq and like all of that region, right?
The Fertile Crescent.
Geographically, exactly. When you look geographically at what that is, you can't get to Europe unless you go through there. You can't get to Africa unless you go through there. You can't get to Asia unless you go through there. So when you sit there as in this incredible supply and demand situation, all you got to do is like, all right, I'm gonna charge you to come through here, or I'm gonna charge a tax when you want to sell through here. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. That's why people that own ports, like, do you know how much money you make when you're able to control commerce?
Man,
they're not the people that you're going to see out here with big chains and everything. They're the people that's going to decide how your neighborhood's going to get zoned.
Man,
they're the people.
Now you want to break it down for us, please. I'm sorry, I'm interrupted. I'm in church right now. No, these are the people that have decided whether or not you're going to even see bread on the shelves in Walmart. See, people don't understand that there's a different level of power and influence in economics that operates, but because, especially for ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery here in America, it's hard for us to even grasp that because we've never really seen what real wealth looks like. We are purposefully made into a bottom caste in this nation to make the richest nation in the world and never see a piece of it, which is why I'm such a strong advocate for reparations, not because it's some nicety that we need. Number one, economically, we need it because we're about to jump off a cliff. I know everybody, and we can get into this a little bit later too. I know everybody got excited about that 1.6 trillion spending power and everything else. That is not what you think it is. I promise you. We don't have money. We don't have wealth. We
don't have none of that. We don't have none of that. So if I were to take it back, you know, to kind of like what we were talking about before, it's like, there's a reason you don't know. There's a reason you don't know. There is a reason. There is a reason. And I'm going to say this too, because I'm so sick of people talking about this. Because you got now conservatives are saying it because they get irritated talking about being woke. And then you got people on the left that are kind of saying it because it's cool. I'm going to tell this because anybody that's really about this life, and you'll get this, and anybody that's really about this life will understand what I'm saying when I say this. Being woke is not cool, and it never has been. And it never will be. What you think is woke is, I done learned this little bit of information that the vast population doesn't really know, and I'm going to share it, and I'm going to just be mad, right? That's not what that is. Being woke, like being actually woke, will get you killed. People don't really put that amount of weight on it, especially here in America. That stuff gets you killed. Because when you're actually aware of the certain things that are going on, you can't not do something about that. Which is the story of every one of our civil rights.
Man, go ahead, brother, please. Keep going, bro.
is when they really start putting in work, when they really get boots on the ground, when you start having the SNCCs of the world, when you start having the civil rights movements of the world, in terms of like what we've had going on here, when you have the Black Panthers, when you have, you know, even when certain gangs got started initially as just like trying to protect themselves from white violence, when you start really thinking about that, and then you look at how America responded to the leadership and takes every one of them out, it's not cute. Woke isn't showing up on Instagram Live at a Black Lives Matter rally. I'm sorry. You can't be woke by getting all your political education from memes. I'm sorry. And it's unfortunate that you got people that are marching out in the streets for, you know, people are still out here, you know, talking about George Floyd and everything. And that's no disrespect to him or his family or what they've had to go through. But it's like, if George Floyd is like the epitome of anti-Blackness in America to you, you have no idea what's being done to you. That's like this. There's an iceberg, and that's this. That's nothing. And when you actually aware, and it's funny that even scriptures say this, right? When you increase in wisdom, you will increase in sorrow. So there is a reason why there is this phenomenon when people are actually woke, and you also wonder, like, why are you so grumpy? Why are you so this? Why are you so that? Because that is the human reaction to understanding some of the deep, darkest forms of wickedness, and especially if you're not a person that's in control of how that plays out, and knowing that it's like it's above you. It's like, damn, I know about that. Ain't nothing I can really do about it. Like
right now, it's the highest depression rates and suicide rates and overdose rates and all these different crazy things that are killing our people today, and people across the world. But I mean, just people in general. Is depression, suicide, like it's skyrocketing right now, because it's like a lot of people are kind of waking up to what's going on, and they're just kind of like, fuck am I supposed to do about it? Just like you said, the sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And it's like, you know, there's so many years ahead, like there's so many years ahead, like decades if not hundreds of years ahead of us. This is shit they've had their forefathers been planning. You know, they've had four fathers like planning this shit for them. And this shit is being handed down from generation to generation. They know, that's why they look up to George Washington the way they do. He's passing down the game plan. Like, look, the times may change, but this is the structure. You know, he was the, you know, the original lord of the game, you could say. Like, you know, he was the original kingpin of the shit, if you want to call it that. But that's, well, not even that, because it goes back to Britain, but that's the point you made earlier about not being cute. You said right after that, you said the controlling the ports and how this all connects to the power structure and everything, and the sense of impending helplessness, so to speak, when you are woke, and why it is definitely a troubling situation. Because that's how you're tying in all these things with the lost souls and the identity of the soul and this and that. They worked out a legal framework with these ports. You know, I'm looking into this thing about maritime law versus land rule of the land, a law of the land, and how there's this huge difference between the land laws and the maritime law, and how we're actually being traded like, you know, cargo on our social security and our credit. Like, you know, we don't really own our own identity at this point. And they have a legal contract. You know, the moment they stamp our footprints and our handprints into these little birth certificates, they immediately consider us lost or dead at sea. And they can literally trade our, you know, and this is, you know, coming from the entrepreneurship level, which we're both, you know, getting into, and we're seeing how this shit works. Man, this shit is like, it's really is like, I understand how or why they would need to have to go to separate schools to learn this shit, because this really is the occult. Like, if you were a real businessman, you're gonna have to tap into the occult. Like, they are on some weird, wicked shit with this money system and everything, what they're doing with it. And the reason why I bring up the ports is because the Pope is the one who controls the ports of all the world, and that's where his power comes from. When England and the British East India Company was falling out with the West, with the West over the, you know, the British Tea Party, the whole situation where they were dumping tea because they were mad at taxes. I mean, this shit was going back to a whole restructuring of economic power. You know, not only, I mean, these are their own people saying, hey, look, we don't want to be taxed by the king no more. And it's like, oh, you want to play that game? Ah, okay.
Now, you just mentioned something really interesting, right? This just kind of goes back to like just how sick America is, and we're so steeped in BS that we don't even realize. Think about it like this: the Boston Tea Party, right? And you probably thought about this before, but it's just something I want to bring to the audience because anytime I brought this up to somebody, they never really have thought about it like this. Let's think about this: Boston Tea Party, right? It is the most spineless, cowardice, and probably, in my opinion, one of the most spineless and wicked moves of the entire war. And I'm going to tell you why. And it's celebrated. And it never really made sense to me. You got some white men that are fighting against the British, right? They're upset about taxes and taxation without representation and them boarding in their houses. Stuff that, you know, you could be legitimately upset about that. But they decided they're going to dress up. Let's just think about this. They're going to dress up as Native Americans, commit vandalism, and mess up property and everything to make a statement.
Wow, that sounds oddly familiar, but I digress.
Right. Now let's think about this again. Why are you dressing up as Native Americans? Because you know if the ish hits the fan, they're not going to come looking for you. So you know Britain well enough to know that whoever you're dressed up like, that if it does fall out, they're going to get annihilated and not you. So this quote unquote heroic, amazing part of the war that is celebrated by families across the nation as some military victory
Wow.
is this spineless decision that we're going to put innocent people in harm's way and be what the scriptures would call a false witness. We're going to put them in harm's way so we can make a political statement.
So they didn't have the balls to stand up for themselves, so they dressed up as other people. That's funny as shit.
Yeah, why not just dress up? Why not just dress up as the Minutemen and go on there and just say, hey, nah, we're the colonists. This is what we're doing. Why? That sounds like if we're gonna really take it there, that sounds like Antifa to me. If that's what you want to, everybody always talks about, especially conservatives, like, oh, why are you wearing a mask? Why you this? Why you that?
Why your forefathers
dress like
people that they're not?
People that they're not.
To go make a military decision to cause consequences
to come upon another group of people.
Y'all didn't.
It wasn't like the Native Americans were like, "Hey, man, we're gonna rock with you, and we're gonna all do this thing together." You knew exactly what you were doing. That was part of what everybody calls the brilliance of it. They dressed up like somebody that they weren't. It was like guerrilla warfare, and it was like, no, come on, man, are you serious? Are you serious? Think about it like this: the Boston Tea Party, right? It's so funny how America was founded on the very things that we claim America is against. Boston Tea Party. Not the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre. How does the Boston Massacre start? It's a bunch of white people throwing snowballs and rocks at the police.
Because
they're upset about their financial and socioeconomic conditions. So they're assaulting the police, right? Because they feel that something is unjust in the system. They assault the police. The police shoot back, and then that's called the shot heard around the world, and then the war starts. But then when we throw rocks at the police, it's because we're animals and we're ungrateful. You see how that works? I thought the citizens supposedly had enough wherewithal to know things that they need in their communities and things that are harming them. But black people are, in ADOS specifically, somehow we're not capable of understanding certain things harm our communities and certain things have detrimental effects to us. Therefore, this is how we're going to respond. I'm not saying the ways that we respond always are the best ways, but to say that the anger and the rage isn't warranted, like, think about this. When Watts happened, when the riots in Watts and everything was, just like going crazy during the civil rights movement, and Dr. Martin Luther King gets up there and he gets to Detroit, and people are screaming and going crazy. They're like, "Hey, we won," even though like stuff is burning and the city's on fire. And Martin Luther King Jr., he's like, why would you even be happy about this? And he was like, and the guy's talking to him says, because we finally got them to listen to us. And then that's when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous quote comes in, and he says that riots are the language of the oppressed and the unheard. Because it's like you tried it. People think that we haven't tried all the other avenues before. Nobody thinks to like, okay, we go to violence first. Well, that's not true. America knows how to do that very well.
Captains of the industry.
For us as a people,
though, that's never always been our first response. We are abnormally gracious. We are abnormally merciful. We're just like that. We're just like that. So when you see us pop off, it's just like somebody that you know that is usually really cool, and then they just pop off for no reason.
They're holding on to a lot. I know, it ain't no joke.
Exactly. So that's but for whatever reason, because how America has programmed people to think about Black folks, nobody takes us seriously. But for any other group of human beings around the world, that would be a red flag. But it's not a red flag here. It would be if we saw a group of Korean Americans get out in the street and start protesting and doing this and doing that. People would start paying attention. They'd be like, oh my God, something must be happening because we don't never see them go crazy like this. Think about this. They got a whole anti-Asian hate bill passed. I ain't see one Asian march.
I mean, that's when I knew China really runs shit. But that's when I found out, oh, China runs this bitch. That's what's going on now. Because when the fuck has an Asian American been in my entire I've seen Asians my entire life. Never. Okay, we might clown them every once in a while, but it's not like we're like attacking their fucking character and beating them up and shit because they're Asian. Like, that's not what we're doing here. Like, it's never been a situation where I've seen an Asian American getting bullied for being Asian.
I wouldn't even say that. I've seen some cases where people get bullied for being Asian, but I would say it like this because it's deeper than that, right? Because I think when you get into like experiential racism, there's always an exception to the rule. Somebody got some experience somewhere. So I say it like this: real racism is we as Black people have never in the history of the United States of America been able to weaponize an institution against another group of people. We've never done that. We've never had the capability of doing that. But it's always been done to us. So when you have people that are coming around saying, Asian hate this and Asian hate that, it's like y'all dealt with some mild discrimination. And that's not to say that certain things weren't bad. Like, yes, there were internment camps for the Japanese. Yes, the Chinese, they had the Chinese Exclusion Act and different things. I'm not saying that didn't exist. But what I'm saying is you didn't have the entire government weaponized against you from its inception until today to keep you in a certain place. Because even with the Japanese Americans, they got reparations for being put in internment camps.
So they got reparations for that?
Man.
I didn't even know. I knew about I was going to bring up the internment camps. I'm like, the most recent thing I can think of in history where Asian Americans were harassed on a heavy level was those internment camps. That shit's crazy. Like, I can't believe they would do that over some shit that they fucking our own government orchestrated them themselves. But that's besides the point. The severity of and the magnitude of the oppression and the amount of discrimination that's happening to our brothers and sisters, like that's really what's getting me, to think, why are they getting to plead their case before we even got to solve ours? You see what I'm saying? Like, how is it that they can plead their case and make a national vote about it, get a whole law passed and everything, like, within a matter of, I don't know how long they've been pleading this case for. Like, I don't know if this has been going on for, like, this is like a systemic thing against Asian Americans. Because, from my understanding, like I said, I personally haven't witnessed, outside of the minor joking around that people do, I've seen Asians, I don't think I've ever been racist. Maybe it's because of the Asians that I hang out with. Do I sound racist by saying Asians? Like, I don't even know what that kind of discrimination looks like. I
wouldn't even say. Well, number one, you got to think about, like, okay, who are all the Asians? You got to think about India. Yeah. You got to think about China. So you got that. But then I would also say, like, okay,
let's just really think about
this. Let's think about the problems that black folks have, and then let's think about the Asians, right? Are Asians known for just getting like the stuffing beat out of them by the police?
No, not that I know of.
Are Asians known for somehow, some way, always getting denied for economic opportunities?
No.
They actually do better in a lot. According to a lot of statistics, they even do better than most white folks. Okay, so has there ever been a time where, just systemically, where their land just gets taken without redress? We don't see that either, but we see it with us though. So it's like at the end of the day, like this group of people that I come from is the only group of people in the history of this nation, and quite frankly, I would even dare say the world, that has had to go through such an intricate, well-planned amount of oppression against us. In terms of, like, if you really start studying different systems on like why they set this thing up like this and why they set this thing up like that, and then how language changed throughout. But somehow, some way, at the end of the day, this is why when it talks about judging a tree by its fruit, that goes into just more than just like, oh, I'm trying to see if you worship the Most High or not. It's just with anything. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you wrote in that Constitution, that Declaration of Independence. I don't care what, and even in there, that'll tell me a lot about you. I'm gonna look at what you do. You say we have equal rights, but you categorized me as 3/5 of a human being. You say you got rid of slavery, but somehow you make a provision that there can still be slavery if somebody commits a crime. And then you got to ask a question, oh, what's a crime? And then what does the United States say? Anything that we say is a crime?
You know what's crazy? I actually got to look this. I actually got to make sure I actually got to look this up, the name of the article and what it's called. But the headline for this article that I read last week was, I believe it was a federal prison or a state prison. It was a state prison sued the federal government. That's what it was. Private prison sued the federal government because they didn't meet their quota for inmates.
That's in the contract that they signed.
Fucking crazy.
They do that initially. When they there's a I wish I remember what the article was called, but I could probably send it to you if you want. But there's an article where it kind of breaks down like, no, these are what these contracts look like that they'll have with the federal government. And the federal government agrees, okay, the private prison will say, okay, in order to get the revenue that we need it filled to, let's say, just for example, we needed 80% capacity, okay? We need you to keep this prison at 80% capacity. We don't care what you got to do it, but keep it at 80% capacity. If it's not kept at 80% capacity and it goes below that, then we can legally implement certain fees and fines against you for not keeping up your end of the bargain. This is basic contract law. And because the state is thinking, okay, we have a surplus of prisoners because we just arrest people for all types of things all the time. We need somewhere to put them. Rather than spending our own money, they'll keep them for us. We'll get a little piece of the deal. They can do what they got to do. And we're keeping these, quote unquote, depending on who you ask and what they did, menaces to society. We keep them out of the general population. Everybody's happy. But then the problem is you get certain impetus to keep those prisons at 80%. So then when you look into privatized prisons, you see, why does everybody have abnormally long sentences? Why are they all in here for these particular crimes? Why do they all look a certain way? Why do they all put in, like, okay, for example, like this is one of the coldest parts about the prison system. If you ever really pay attention to a lot of prisons, they're put out in these rural areas, right? So here in North Carolina, we have corrections centers that are outside of Southern Pines, North Carolina. Southern Pines is the golf capital of the world, where the PGA Tour starts and everything. Got a corrections facility right out on the outskirts of Southern Pines. You got a corrections facility on the outside of Rockingham, North Carolina. And what they do is the reason they do that is because of how the 3/5 clause worked, which is basically when you have prisoners in your state or your county, they are counted in the census. They may not have rights there. They're counted in the census. When you have a higher population, you get more state funding. So why don't I take all these black people in this inner city? I take them to this prison that's like a county, 2 counties over, in this county where it looks like all they have is cotton fields and corn farms. I put them out there, boost up the population. Now they get more funding that they need for schooling. They get more funding that they need for infrastructure. They can get more grants. It's a game. It's a game. Like it's so deep, and they do it on purpose. This is on purpose. None of this. This is what I tell people all the time. Like with black people, like nothing that happened to us was by accident. I don't care what Tucker Carlson tells you. I don't care what Glenn Beck said. I don't care what Don Lemon said. I don't care what nobody said. Okay, I'm telling you. Just objectively look at American history. There isn't nothing that happened to us that was an accident. And that's not being like weird tinfoil hat conspiracy theories. It's just
do your thing, bro. That's true.
Just look at what some of the dysfunctions we have in our communities, and then you can always trace it back to the government implemented this or allowed this to happen. There was either some benign neglect, or you were actively participating in the terrorism or the theft or whatever the case was. That's real talk.
Check this out. February 7th of 2022. Talking like this, how we're doing right now, would actively put us on the domestic terrorist list.
Really?
And mind you, we'd have to blow up a little bit before, we get put on that list, because, they don't really care about people talking shit. But it's like, if you actually have some influence behind you, and it's like, oh, you got some numbers behind you, oh, people actually are paying attention, oh, it's time to take one for the team, huh? That's how they gonna try and do us. But that's effectively,
I feel like
effectively the act stated that anyone sowing disinterest or mistrust with the government is effectively considered a domestic terrorist.
That's insane.
That's insane, man.
Oh, my man booted out the conversation ASAP. He said, all right, bye.
I'm trying to, my computer's acting weird. Hold on one second.
You said goodbye. Goodbye. We are no longer, I have no idea what you talking about. Face the what? Man, face the opinions. Keep that shit to yours. This is, nah, bro. We ain't with, nah,
Oh, man.
Let me in the Skype session right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some technical difficulties. We have seemed to lost our co-host, Christian Mosley. He'll be right back with us in a moment. There we go.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We live.
There we go. I'm sorry, bro. I didn't mean to scare you, bro. Look, we ain't taking hits for nobody, all right? We in y'all's hands, okay? That's what it is. It is what it is.
Listen, as long as we telling the truth, I know we gonna be straight.
Exactly.
That's really like
ain't nothing better to live for or to die for is the truth. At the end of the day, we all gotta die for something. You rather die for some bullshit?
Come on now.
Come on now.
Come on now.
Come on now. But that's like, man, like, see, now you got me fired up, because like we really getting into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, which really dealing with some of this real stuff that's happening in the real world, right? So okay, this is your show, so I want you to lead it, but I kind of want to get into that thing about that spending power, the supposed spending power that black. Let's get it. It's not surprising when you actually look into what's really going on. It's not. It's really not. Okay.
Americans instead have seen their wealth actually fall by 14%.
Spending power. Frank.
Hey, good morning to you, Andrew. Black spending power reached a record $1.6 trillion in 2021. The ability to buy, save, and invest more than doubling since 2000. That growth exceeding the full U.S. economy, but actually lagging other ethnic groups, Latinos with a 288% increase, Asians with a 388% increase in spending power. However, other groups, they've also seen an increase in their net worth. Black Americans instead have seen their wealth actually fall by 14%. And with the S&P gaining 27% last year, the value of U.S. homes increasing by 31% last year. Many black leaders are asking the black community to really rethink how it spends.
This is disturbing on so many different levels, but I mean, what else can we say? Save your money, buy assets, not life.
I'm gonna just end it on that note, but we saw another video in particular that I can pull up, but they essentially had the same message. I tried to get that other video that you saw personally to make it make more sense, but elaborate on that for us.
So this
is a
kind of classic
mistake that we make a lot, especially as black people, because these numbers, right, are kind of unrealistic. Nobody's really seen like $1 trillion. Nobody's seen, for the most part, most of the general public, like we haven't seen what billions and billions of dollars. Can't even fathom it. We don't. So when these numbers start getting thrown out, it doesn't. Unless it's like broken down, it's like kind of like realistically what that's supposed to look like. It doesn't really make them. It just doesn't. So let's just think about it like this, right? Number one, I'm a practical guy, right? I'm a real practical guy. So I did the math earlier because I was just like, okay. Everybody said like, okay, black spending is up 1.6 trillion. This is historical. This is great, blah, blah, blah. And so what 1.6 trillion sounds like is, well, why the hell are these Negroes crying so much about not having money? Y'all got $1.6 trillion and you're all spending it on Jordans and cars and whatever else, right? Right? Because that is how we are talked about. We're considered like these financially illiterate human beings that just want flashy stuff outside of just being stable and wanting to, want better for ourselves and our communities. Got you on that, right? So let's just do some quick math, right? So if you do 1.6 trillion and what they say as of right now is that the black population is somewhere between like 43, 44 million. So let's say, I'll just be conservative, let's say 43 million. So you just divide that 1.6 trillion divided by, let's say about 43 million. Right, and this is real easy. So you're talking about $37,209 per person, right? That's spending. Here's what you're not taking into account. Number one, people don't have liquid cash in $37,209. Black people don't even have that most black people don't have that in all of their assets. And the other thing is $37,000 in a year, that's not that much money. That's like a little bit above poverty, but it's not.
You might as well be making minimum wage. That damn near is the minimum wage line. Like that's
right. But here's the cold part. The cold part is and it was funny because when it was said, and I remember because I've been seeing this video get passed around a lot, and people are just like, see, all you got to do is pinch your pennies and you'll be fine. Problem is, y'all didn't look at what other people are doing. They didn't really get into how your spending went up, but then Hispanic spending went up by like twice yours. White spending went up by 2 to 3 times yours. Asian spending went up by almost 2 to 3 times your spending, right? And because we understand kind of how like inflation and different things work, that means like, honestly, like your 1.6 trillion compared to somebody else's 12 or 40 or however many, much of a multiplication that you have, it means you can't compete with that. That's like saying that your candle business can compete with the Rockefellers. That's unrealistic. You can't compete. You and maybe your skin routine business that you're starting, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't start businesses, but what I'm saying is you wanting to do the different small business ways of getting, as you believe to be, generational wealth. You can't compete with the Build-A-Burgers. I'm sorry. You don't really understand what level of economics that is. We start small businesses and we go rent out a spot at some building. White money owns the land and the building that you got to rent in order to create your black excellence. We don't own that. We own hardly any
Preach.
land. We own less than 5% of America's
Preach.
land. We make up 14% of the population. We used to own, I think it was like, what is it? How many is 15, I want to say it was like 15, 16 million acres of land that we used to have at one point. And it should have been more than that. We don't have it anymore. And nobody really wants to answer why. Some people want to say it's because black people aren't responsible with resources, which is absolutely not true, because we can actually find documentation where the USDA and other members of different government branches conspired to steal land from us. Here's the other thing, right? This is man, see, you got me, man. See, now you got me wound up. Now you got me wound up, and I'm about to get into my bag.
Man, get in that bag, bro. Get in that bag, bro. Like, you need to.
I'm
gonna pull something up for you guys real quick, okay? Because everybody got all excited about this, and we don't understand. And they mentioned it in the video, and nobody really looked at the end part. It talked about how we have these $1.6 trillion in spending, but our net worth went down. That means wealth. That means what you own, right? Your net worth went down, but your spending went up somehow. Is it because you don't know how to control money, or is it because you never really had any wealth in this nation? Your income has risen and fallen, but you don't really control anything. We don't. There was more blacks in the Senate during the Reconstruction era than there were now.
Crazy how that worked.
The White House, the White House was more black during segregation in the Civil Rights era than it is now. People don't want to talk about that. So
please educate, because there's a lot of things like on that level that it's like when we think black history, we think it was just slavery, and that's because that's what they pretty much feed us 24/7, slavery and destruction. But it's like there was a lot of situations where power was moved on our side and for the benefit, and we had a lot of controlling interest in things.
That's absolutely correct. That's a fact. So I'm gonna pull where to go. Is it? So let's talk about this real quick, right? Because we're talking about the trillions of dollars in spending, but we got to look at patterns. We got to understand what this means. Income you can have a high income lifestyle. You can make a lot of income, have high income, and not have any wealth. Because wealth is about what you keep. Right. So if you're
shout out to my social studies teacher in grade school. Land equals wealth equals power.
Land equals wealth equals power, right? Still to this day. So when black people are some of the most landless, is especially like if you were going to go about ratio, we're like the most landless group of people in the United States. It's like that for a reason. Just because, and I'm gonna get into this article right here. We think that because we see LeBron James or Oprah that black people have made it. There's a reason why when you look at wealth statistics, they talk about a median wealth and not the mean wealth. Because mean is the average. That's when you take all of what you got and then you divide it by how many of those subjects you have. But because when you do the average and you got to divide it, that means you get a LeBron James or an Oprah or a Tyler Perry. That's abnormal for Black America, which means it throws off the average because it's not realistic. So the median is what's considered that middle level for that particular population in whatever group that is, or for whatever number sequence you're going through. And so for the median wealth, right? So if we're looking at, this is from the Washington Post, but they pulled this from the Federal Reserve, and I can even pull that up too. So it's talking about, this is in 1968. And the reason we talk about 1968 is because Black wealth has basically been stagnant since 1968. Interestingly enough, that's when the Fair Housing Act was signed, but somehow that didn't change our wealth, even though fair housing means you're supposed to be able to own homes and land and such, but we didn't take advantage of that, or were we locked out, right? So it says in 1968, a typical middle-class Black household had about $6,674 in wealth. And that's compared with $70,786 for the typical middle-class white household. And this is from a historical survey of consumer finances, right? Then we go to 2016, the typical middle-class Black household. We're talking about middle class. We're not talking about low class. We're not talking about somebody in the projects. We're talking about the people that are considered, they're doing pretty well for themselves as Black folk, okay? In 2016, the typical middle-class Black household had $13,024 in wealth. The median white household in the exact same situation, $149,703 in wealth. There's a racial wealth gap, right? And so here's what we don't want to talk about. That didn't happen overnight. That didn't happen because Black people were just moping around and lazy and everything. It's very interesting that we were starting to become lazy after we decided to not work for free. That's a whole other conversation. But if we really want to get into it, think about it like this. Let's say 1776 to 1865. Black people can virtually build almost no wealth for themselves because we are legally, legislatively designated as a bottom caste. We don't even have certain rights in this nation. And what little rights that we were getting or that we thought we had, they weren't being protected by the powers that be. But white people, some of the rich and the powerful, some people came over here as poor paupers and were able to get a piece of the stereotypical American dream. But they were able to fight for that unbothered. We were stopped completely. Look about that. 1776 to 1865. Then from 1865 to 1876, something very interesting happened. That was the Reconstruction era. It was one of the greatest wealth building periods ever in the history of Black people in this nation. We have never been that wealthy since then. We've never, I don't care what you see with these rappers, with these athletes, with these superstars, they don't have the type of wealth, money, and influence that they did back then. And it was just average for people to start getting educated and building businesses and doing all these amazing things because we're resilient people. And then in 1877, Reconstruction is ended. The South is basically put back in charge and the Union soldiers pull out. So now, again, this whole time, once again, Black wealth is disrupted. We lose 90% of our land in a 100-year span of all those billions and millions of acres. And then once you put all that together, you realize once again, white people, once again, were building wealth undisturbed. Then you get into the 40s or into the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, when you have the Great Depression, you have the Renaissance era in terms of like the Harlem Renaissance and different things going on, and the Industrial Revolution and certain booms happening in production and factories. Again, what is happening? We're still in the middle of Jim Crow, which means white people are still building wealth undisturbed. Then Great Depression kicks in, then it's kicking everybody's butt. But here's what happened. There's an amazing book I would love for everybody to go read. It's called When Affirmative Action Was White. Most people don't want to talk about how white people have currently and have always received the most government benefits anytime they've been able to move up a rung in that wealth ladder.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because this is one of the things Martin Luther King touched on. And it was that the wage gap, the economic disparity between, it wasn't even from natural born Americans. A lot of immigrants from overseas, whether they be, mostly European nations, Asian nations, they would come and get their land grants. They get their education paid for. They get literally everything handed to them so they can start businesses and families and homes and farms to build the economy. They were being funded by the government to do that. They were given that leg up, handed it out for free.
So Exactly. So that's why that term "pull yourself up by the bootstraps" is BS, because nobody's done that. You can't name any group of people that have done that in the United States of America. Black people are the only people in the history of the United States that have been through what we've gone through and being told to suck it up and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Nobody else has had to deal with that. Nobody had to be in chattel slavery for hundreds of years and then deal with another, few decades and decades of Jim Crow, and then mass incarceration, then an illegitimate drug war, and then everything else that comes along with all of the governmental experiments and medical apartheid, and like the list goes on and on and on. Nobody went through that and then bounced back and said, "Oh, okay, cool, yeah, we all got a piece of the American dream." There's there's no Asian person, there's no Hispanic person, there is no white person, there is no African immigrant that can come over here and tell us, "Oh yeah, you guys just got to suck it up. You got to do blah, blah, blah." It's like, you don't understand the magnitude of what has happened here. And then you don't understand the magnitude of what we contributed, and you don't understand the magnitude of what was taken from us. So like, even the little bit of wealth that we were able to build, that probably, had we been left alone, we probably would be much farther along than we are now. Even that was taken from us. And if it's so much about being we're inferior and don't know how to handle resources and different things, then why is it every time we get some, you got to take it? Just let us fumble the ball then, if that's the case. We all know that that's not true.
Or they'll put you in situations where you do make some money and you end up spending it on, you're not allowed to spend it on the community or certain things. It's supposed to go to this family or that brand or that car or that, that gadget, whatever it is, and flowing it right back to their family businesses or flowing it right back to their economy pool. So it's like, at the end of the day, whether they give it to us or not, they're the ones giving it to us. And that ties into scripture where it says, they shall be the lender, you shall be the one in need at all times. Like, they shall lend to you, and all this about being punished. This ties into some stuff that we may not, I don't expect a lot of our viewers, unless they're coming from the Hebrew community, to understand these concepts about where we stand as a people oppressed and why this is all happening, because it takes a lot of strength to have to go through all this. There has to be a reason why all this disparity is happening. There has to be. And the reason is clearly explained, when given time to study history and scripture and how the world works. There are higher powers than the things that we serve, than the idols that we were mentioning earlier. There are higher powers than the things we give our time and our energy and our obedience to. I'm so glad you brought that point up about obedience, bro. Like, that's literally the essence of worship, is obedience. And to be obedient to, the principles that are required to get what it is that you want. There is a ritual for all that. There's a ritual for everything you do in life. Every day of the week is a ritual. They're literally named after gods. So there's a certain essence of reality that's ignored because of, I guess you could say, the responsibility of life itself is still misunderstood. To be alive is a misunderstood situation right now for a lot of people. Science has broken us down to nothing more than just an accident and some chemical compilations that evolved over time to become what we are today. And we're just going to keep on evolving. That's like the mainstream idea of what humanity and life is. It's just a scientific construct of random, biological and, mathematical formulas that just happen to formulate the right way. You know what I'm saying? It's all a mystery for people, because that's what's taught. And that's where the paganism comes in, because the stuff is clearly explained. It says literally, if you can't look out in nature itself and understand that there is a creative design behind all this, there's a genius behind all this, there is a creator behind all this. If this is all an accident to you, you gonna get what you get coming, because this is all an accident to you. So you fuck around and end up becoming the accident. Like, life is what you make it, as they say. And I do believe Yah plays by those principles. He gives us exactly what we want. He tells us to choose the way. He tells us to choose life. Don't choose death. Choose right. Don't choose wrong. I give you life. I give you death. You choose. Make it what you want to make it. And that's why we got to uplift him in our hearts and uplift him in our minds and uplift him on that level, because he's going to pay every word, every deed, everything that's ever been done in this life will be taken into account. And we've got to answer for everything. And we've got to be able to stand, face to face in the presence of ourselves and in the Most High. And if we're gonna not like what we see, if we are gonna like what we see, that's up to us. What have we been living for? If you've been living for this, you're gonna find out when you see yourself. If you've been living for that, you're gonna find out when you see yourself. If you've been living for him, you're gonna find out when you see him. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these things are coming together, and it's a lot of things to face, but we're facing the facts together, people. That's what we doing. We facing reality.
Let's.
But
that's really what it's all about. And even like you said, yeah, it's about obedience. It's about like the fact that we don't realize that God, the Most High,
it's not that he just controls, but
it's not that he just controls, but he's laid out what his will is for every part of our life.
Even when it comes to slavery,
when it comes to slavery, right?
Because
there's these scriptures about slaves obey your masters, and people always use these things like out of context, and they're like, well, see, the Bible's a horrible book because it's pro-slavery. And what we don't understand is, and this is something that for the audience that hasn't seen it, you can go on my YouTube channel and you can look at the series that I did called Christian Nation, and I think the first episode that I went into was kind of just discussing what slavery is. Because if the Bible, are you telling me that the Bible legitimized and said that it was okay, that the transatlantic slave trade was okay? Is that what you're telling me? And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't, because even the Most High had stipulations for like, okay, yeah, there's a way that you could have slaves or bondservant or whatever. This is how you treat them. This is how long you can keep them. You can't have a slave for more than 7 years. A lot of people don't know that. For us, it was a lifetime sentence. But what's interesting is when it came to the white indentured servants that were coming over here, like off the Mayflower and everything, if you do your research, you will see that most of these contracts were for 7 years. Nobody really like talks about that. So like, I'm not saying that the Irish or the Scottish or whoever came over here and would get their butts handed to them just like we were in some cases, very rare. But also, there was this element of normality and your humanity being attached to you where they understood like, okay, we can't keep you like this forever. That's why slavery that happened to us was so horrible, because there was the element of dehumanization that had to happen in order for them to be able to justify what happened to us, to not have to deal with that cognitive dissonance. The scriptures also say that it's illegal for you to free a slave empty-handed. Well, what happened to black people? We were freed empty-handed, because the concept is you can't take somebody. They have the reason that you can only get a slave in the nation of Israel is one of two ways: prisoner of war, or they owe you a debt, which means that at that point, when they're in your possession, they have nothing. That's why they're your slave. They have nothing. And when you release them, you can't release them with nothing, because then they're going to have to come back to you or be subject to somebody else. So what you do is, because the just and righteous thing to do is, you don't send them out empty-handed. You send them out with some grain to go start a farm. You send them out with some money. You send them out with clothes on their backs. You send them out blessed. Just like, here it goes, just like Israel was sent out blessed from Egypt, because the concept is you don't let somebody out of bondage empty-handed. But what does America do? The opposite. This is why I use the term antichrist about so many American policies so much, because it's anti the nature of the Messiah. It's anti the nature of the Most High.
Ladies and gentlemen, he just bridges the gap between politics and scripture, y'all, and genuine Torah, and how it applies today, people. You just blew my mind with that. Please say that again one more time, please.
So let's think about it like this, right? You can't let somebody go empty-handed, because you end up with, as Frederick Douglass and even Martin Luther King Jr. put it, you have freedom to cold, you have freedom to hunger, you have freedom to violence, you have freedom to the elements, you have freedom to poverty, right? You have freedom to all of these horrible things that can happen to you, because you can't protect yourself, you can't provide for yourself. What the Most High does is says, because if you look in Torah, when you read those first 5 books, you can always see it. Actually, it's really throughout scripture. God is always reminding his people, do X, Y, and Z because when you were in Egypt, the same thing happened to you. Don't do X, Y, and Z because when you were in Egypt, the same thing happened to you. So the reason you don't let a slave go empty-handed is because you didn't leave Egypt empty-handed. So in America, it is common practice for when you put somebody in bondage that they leave not only empty-handed, but in some cases, America is so wicked that you leave owing more than you did when you were in there in the first place. You got people that, this is common. You got people that get locked up and put in prisons for years and years and years. And they end up with having not just losing years of their life, but now they also got legal fees that they got to pay off when they get out. So now you got to get a job anywhere that you can, hoping that somebody hires you because it's legal to discriminate against somebody that has a felony. That's why it's kind of called like the new Jim Crow or neo Jim Crow, because it's legal. You can discriminate against, like just like people did with black people. You can discriminate against somebody with their criminal record, with housing, with food stamps, they've changed it with voting, but before it used to be voting, with firearm sales. Like you could literally have your constitutional rights revoked just for having a criminal record. Here's another thing. Here's another interesting thing, because nobody ever really talks about this. Where is the scriptural concept for prison? There's scriptural concepts.
Let's talk about
scriptural concepts for involved for like indentured servitude when you've done certain things. There's scriptures for if you've stolen, this is what you do to pay it back. And then there's scripture for certain things like, oh, if you do this, this, and this, you shouldn't even be alive anymore. Point blank, period. There is no locking you in a cage until you learn your lesson. That doesn't exist. So if this is a so-called Christian nation, right, and we don't see anything in scripture about prison in terms of it being a form of consequences that the Most High gave us, and it's interesting that any time that prison is mentioned, it's always from a pagan nation, i.e. Rome, i.e. the Philistines, i.e. the Amorites and the Ammonites and all these other people. You don't hear about the nation of Israel being told that you have a prison.
It's crazy. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I never really put that together for myself. They do have a lot of laws regarding death and sacrifice and life, but they do not have a prison system, huh?
Because think about it
think about it like this. Have you ever seen like in certain cases you'll have that's like considered a repeat sex offender, right? In Israel, there's no concept and no place for somebody to be a repeat sex offender because the first time you do it, you don't exist anymore.
That shit is dead right there and then. Just stop. You done. You had the brain to do some shit like that? Done.
And the thing is, what kind of a deterrent is it if I know, regardless of how sick I am, if I get caught doing this, I die. In America, it's if I get caught doing this, I got to move away and maybe get a restraining order put against me and I can't be around certain areas and different things, but I can go about living my life and possibly go do this again if I haven't been reformed, because prison is not a repentance camp. It's just somewhere that you go and you make the choice of whether or not you want to change your life in there, different things. And then the other thing is we put people in prison for things that aren't even sin.
Very true. Very true. Please preach.
I need somebody to explain to me why we put people in prison for wanting their kids to be in a better school district, so they got to finagle their way to get their kids into a better education and kind of just lying about their zip code in order to get their kids better education. So you lock them up for that. Or we lock people up for substance abuse, which is really a health issue, not something that prison will fix. And in a lot of cases, it makes it worse. So what are we doing? Like, these are just, and this is why I have like on my social media, anybody can check it out on like my Instagram and my Twitter. I have what's called my Berean thoughts. So it's like, I didn't do it this week and I probably need to go ahead or last week, I should say. I'm gonna need to go ahead and do that tomorrow. But I have these thoughts that I just have, like stuff like that. Like, okay, where did we even get prison? Where did we get the idea of that? Where did we get the idea for this, this, and this? Where does that even come from? And then you sit there and think about it, and you're like, actually, that didn't come from the Most High. We act like it did. We certainly do. But if we think about it, no. That's why, like, slavery that happened to us here in this nation is not legitimized by Scripture. Scripture calls that human trafficking. It's not the same as being a servant to somebody that you owed a debt to or lost a war. You bought or stole human beings. You kept them for longer than they were supposed to. Then you bred them, and then you split up families. Then you bred them some more, and you raped them and terrorized them, made them into a bottom caste, did medical experiments and found out how medications work with them and everything else, deprived them of their rights, deprived them of their humanity, deprived them of their constitutional rights. You deprived them of wealth. You deprived them of all these other things. And then we have the nerve to wonder why we get hurricanes or why certain natural disasters, like, and I think that's the other thing, right? Because we talked about this earlier about like the way that the Most High moves. I honestly feel like the Most High doesn't necessarily move differently. I think that there are certain things that the Most High does that we've so found a way in our man ways of explaining certain things away, or saying that it's, some scientific explanation for that, when really it's just like, nah, it might be the Most High just showing himself, but we have a different interpretation of it. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's not moving. It's just like there are people that I've met that I can clearly see have experienced some consequences from some stuff that they've done, or received some like ridiculous sicknesses and whatever. And people just chalk it up to like, oh yeah, my doctor said my this is going on, or my that is going on, or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that thing didn't have to flare up until after you did that. You don't want to talk about that. Like there's certain things that it's just supposed to get your attention. So I feel like, yeah, I'm not saying that everything is God speaking, because I can't stand people that are like that, because it is blasphemous. Like, God ain't speaking all the time. He speaks when he needs to speak, and then he's silent when he needs to be silent. He's God. You're not. There's no on-demand text him and he's supposed to get back with you in 5 minutes. He's sovereign. That's what it means to be sovereign. He gets back to you when he wants to. So with all of that being said, it's like, yeah, there's not really too many, if any, redeeming qualities about this particular nation when you just objectively look at, okay, you say that you're this, and then when I hold up that standard up to you, you don't measure up even close. You got some good laws that might line up with the Most High's instruction, but the fact of the matter is, as a complete entity, you are the complete opposite. And we can't act like there's not going to be even more of a special judgment for claiming to be a representative of the Most High and do everything under the sun that's abominable. Martin Luther King, everybody wants to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. talking about the I Have a Dream speech and little white boys and little black girls holding hands. Don't nobody want to talk about when he said the United States government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And think about it like this, right? That's before 9/11. That's before we was doing drone strikes in Somalia and in Afghanistan and Iraq and all this other, like before we started doing like all the crazy stuff that we've been doing. Even before that, you talking about Vietnam, and he was like, we're the epitome of violence. What does the scriptures always talk about? People that love violence, people that live by the sword, be like all these different things. Like this stuff is real, ladies and gentlemen. But we're so quick to slap a cross or a Christian fish sticker or whatever on anything instead of reading the manual and seeing what's of the Most High and what's not. Which is why, like, when I talk about certain things on my show, whether it's political or spiritual or whatever, if I have a certain conviction about it, it's because the book verifies my position on it. Not my position verifies the Bible. It don't work like that. It's I need to, if it's the rock, as we say, then that means everything's got to conform to fitting around the rock or being built off the rock. I'm not about to chip off little pieces of it so it can fit my little structure, because I'm going to be in trouble. So when I talk about reparations, it's not just because, oh, I'm black and somebody a long time ago dealt with something really bad, and therefore I feel like I deserve something. No, we deserve reparations because you don't let slaves go without anything. And number two, I can trace directly the reasons we don't have wealth back to all of these overtly oppressive systems that are kind of subvertly kind of still in operation. And I can show you where things were stolen. I can show you where the impact has been. I can show you the damage. And not only that, I can show you where America did it to other people and they were willing to make it right. The United States government has given out reparations, I want to say at least 5 times in my lifetime to other groups of people. Nobody knows that. Or I shouldn't say nobody knows that. There's a lot of people that don't know that. It's hilarious when you hear somebody that is a far right-wing conservative and they talk about how anti-reparations they are because they feel like it's socialist, which means that you don't understand what socialism is because it's not. But they'll be like, oh, well, I don't want to pay for mistakes or whatever, right? Or mistakes that I had nothing to do with or a long time ago. People don't know that Trump gave away reparations in 2020 to Guam. Nothing was like
I didn't even know that. I don't know nothing about Guam.
Yeah, it was somewhere between like 3 and 400 million in the middle of the pandemic. Nobody knows about it. Nobody really talked about that. It's called, I think it's HR 1565 or something like that. But you can look it up. It's on the website with the archives, with all the legislation that was written. It's reparations for the Japanese occupation that happened in Guam in World War II. People don't know that Ronald Reagan was the one that signed reparations to the Japanese to give them $25,000 per head for people that were in internment camps. Nope.
Per head.
How Barack it's been happening. So for somebody to be mad about reparations, it's like, it's just that you don't want black people to have it because it's been happening. We can prove it. It's documented. They have dollar amounts that have been given. There are receipts for this stuff.
So obviously there's like a deeply embedded racism that is not even completely understood by the whites themselves. And I'm not saying all whites, but, for the nationalistic, patriotic type where they feel like America's been a good daddy and they could never do wrong. At least in today's day and age, I've seen a lot of Americans take that approach with their government. And it's like, America ain't what you think it is. And it ain't what it's, you don't want it to be what it used to be. Cause it's not, it ain't that. Like you're thinking of a movie. You're thinking of a time where, in all reality, the way I see things coming together is reality's just gonna hit. That's all. Like America, the whole world is about to show us its true colors, and how we decide to take it is how we decide to take it. And a lot of people are still holding on to the past of how things used to be and what things are. And so there's like this deeply embedded patriotism where they feel like America was this beautiful white nation back in the, well, not beautiful white nation, but a beautiful nation, back in the what do you call them TV shows? Leave It to Beaver and type shit. Like, there's just the whistles and the freaking I love my country and hot diddy doo dah, I'm an American and I'm walking in the suburbs and blah 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 blah. And it's like there's this kind of like fantasy that that's how things were, and it's like, granted, times may have in retrospect compared to what we're going through now, it probably seems like good times, but everybody's history. I've asked every parent from every generation, and it's as far back as I could reach, and it's everybody has a fucked up story, everybody has a messed up story, so it's like, so it ain't never really been all right coming up for a lot of people, but we do see an intensity raising, and we do see the heat kind of turning up a bit, and there's still this like deeply embedded but I want it to be like I'm still catching up with the old days, and I don't want things to change. I'm still, deep down, I'm still, set in my ways type of deal. Like I feel there's a heavy sense of I want things like they used to be from every American's point of view. You know what I'm saying? That's why I even think they played those songs at the Super Bowl, because they're the most, popular songs on social media, and at the same time, they're throwbacks from the 90s, damn near, when times were considered chill. You know what I mean? So it's like it was kind of like a throwback to more relaxing times. And of course, it's Black History Month, so they're incorporating that stuff in there. But it's a lot of pandering to how things used to be and not moving forward and trying to figure out what the real problem is for a lot of people. And I'm seeing that being it. And not in any immediate circle. Like I have a lot of friends who understand what time it is, even on that end. Having their own experiences with the world that they've seen alone is enough for them to realize something ain't right. And right now I'm seeing a lot more of these races come together, both black and white coming together, more than anything, despite the narrative being that, this is a crazy country, but it's like, I would say it's half and half. I say that there's a lot of people who want to do better and are trying to get together, and there's the other half that are just like, nope, the reason why this country's messed up is because we're all on the left and we're all wrong and we all don't know what we're talking about. We're all this and we're all, it's like this easy categorization of being this people that all they do is complain and they just want to like just destroy shit and complain. There's that sense of stop messing my country up. You know what I'm saying? There's that sense there.
But I mean, it makes sense, and I think that's the thing that I try to tell. It's funny. I try to explain this to two black people because the way that I was raised, being homeschooled, being around that very majority white, very far right wing conservative evangelical. And that's like you talking about like, and then of course you add the Fort Bragg area into that. So you're talking about like the cream of the crop of conservatism and patriotism. So with me being raised on that, I understand how these people think. I understand what they're, and because I used to go to like different co-ops and have some of the same curriculum that a lot of them had, I understand what they were taught. When you understand what they're taught with no context of blackness or anything else, it makes sense why they're upset. It makes sense why they stormed the Capitol. It makes sense why they think things like reparations and still talking about slavery and everything is so offensive to them, because in reality, the fact of the matter is, like you said, like the Leave It to Beaver age and everything else, when it was that time period, it was great for them. But the problem is, because I ask people this all the time, I say, okay, they say make America great again or whatever. And I'm like, all right, what is that? What's that age you trying to go back to? Some of them will say the Reagan era. And I'll be like, oh, okay, the drug war. And they'd be like, oh, okay, we don't want to go back to that. It'll be like Leave It to Beaver. I'm like, oh, okay, you're talking about Jim Crow. So what you have to admit is that the best times that you ever had came from having to put me in the worst times that I've ever had to be in terms of my people, right? And so that's something that they don't want to think about, and it's something that has been conveniently excluded from their education. Doesn't mean that it's not real, which is why they're acting like it's illegitimate, because they thought that they got all of the real history. So when you feel like you got the full picture, and then somebody comes to you and says, actually, you're missing quite a bit, it's hard to accept the fact that, oh my God, what people that I loved and cared about and respected have taught me was wrong and incomplete. It's a very hard thing to do. That's why it's hard for people. It's hard for a lot of white people to even really get into, and I mean, like legitimately get into talking about police brutality. Reason being is, for a lot of white people, the police are Superman. They're the heroes that come and save the day. There is like these stories that a lot of our families have of cousins getting shot, of people getting the stuffing beat out of them and broken ribs and sexually assaulted and harassed and everything. That stuff don't exist for them. That's not to say that it doesn't happen at all with white people. So like, I want people to hear me when I say that. That's not what I'm saying.
It's a hard job. I mean, we're not throwing no shade or no disrespect overall. I mean, we respect the position, but at the same time, we know what time it is and we know what it is.
We do, but it's also like, even for white people, it's like some of that stuff. Like, I've asked people that have these very harsh criticisms about I'm in no way, shape, or form connected to Black Lives Matter, but that's what they would talk about, like Black Lives Matter and police brutality and all these different things, these social issues that were coming up over the past couple of years. And I remember white people, like, have be very strongly opinionated. And I would ask them, I would say, hey, just out of curiosity, I get that you have very strong opinions about it, and there's nothing that you can do to convince them. But the what I've been taught is the Hebraic way or the rabbinical way of really like arguing or reasoning or debating is asking questions. So I ask him this question every time. Have you personally ever been harassed or assaulted or, violated in any way by the police? And 95% of them will say, almost 100% of them will say, no, I have not. And I'll go, okay. Do you know anybody close to you, at least, or maybe even a friend or a distant family member, anybody? Do you know anybody that has been violated or abused or assaulted or in any way by the police? And 90+% of them will say, no, I don't know anybody like that. And I'm like, okay. So this is like a non-existent issue to you, right? And then I tell them, I'm like, okay, because you don't know anybody for that. And they'll go, no. And I'm like, okay. Because I can name 5 people off the top of my head that have been sexually harassed, that have been physically assaulted and abused, that have been murdered, that have been in my own family, people that I'm blood related to, right? And then they have this kind of subtle mouth drop. And I'm like, yeah, this didn't start with George Floyd. This didn't start with Trayvon Martin. This didn't start with Tamir Rice. It's been going on forever. And even now, like there are killings that even happen even today. Just because it's not caught on a video camera and just because there's not a march doesn't mean it's not happening. Because they don't go crazy for every single thing. People feel like that because it's being pushed in their faces for other propaganda reasons that have nothing to do with benefiting us. And that's a whole nother conversation we could get into.
But that's exactly what I wanted to get into with the way you're taking it, because you're right. It's like, why now all of a sudden the media chooses to highlight these situations in a time where, everything is unstable and everything is, already kind of, either adding fuel to the fire with presenting the information the way that they are. It's good to bring attention to it, but either the country isn't ready to hear that kind of conversation or the government isn't ready to properly distribute that kind of information. There's got to be a misfire on one or the other, or maybe both. What is the purpose of them highlighting all these things now that, mind you, there's social media, people are recording it, sharing it, making it popular, making it more prevalent. I understand that, but it's like, it seems like they've learned to weaponize it in a way where, it's becoming a tool for propaganda, straight up.
No, it is being weaponized. It absolutely is. And that's another thing that like a lot of people don't really realize is the government didn't just get more compassionate and then want to start talking about police brutality. What's happening is the same thing that's been happening to us since the civil rights movement, even before that. This is a way to pacify us by implementing either legislation or words or so-called deeds or whatever that really have no teeth to them. A lot of people don't realize that the Civil Rights Act doesn't really have any teeth to it, because the reason we were marching and having this Civil Rights Act was because of what was happening with Negroes. If you pay attention to the language that was being used with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and a lot of these people, yes, they talked about, different things happening with different people, but at the end of the day, their concern was Negroes, because Negroes in this country were being systematically having these institutions weaponized against them in such a way. What the government came back and did and said was, okay, we'll give you your Civil Rights Act, but we're going to add some stuff to it. So they ended up adding women. They ended up adding gender. They ended up adding, I think they even added disability, if I'm not mistaken. But it was like they all lives mattered, a black thing. And that always happens to us. Or they'll talk about it disingenuously. So now you got Nancy Pelosi and the rest of these Democrats and their goofy looking, right, wearing kente cloth and taking a knee, but don't want to talk about how their support for the 94 crime bill is responsible for destroying our communities. They don't want to talk about how they were silent and virtually did nothing during the Flint water crisis. They don't want to talk about how we have, hookworm in the literal soil down in, I believe it's Mississippi or Alabama, in black neighborhoods. They don't want to talk about how it's either the black Alabama governor or the black Mississippi governor got millions and millions of dollars in COVID relief and is using it to build new prisons. Don't want to talk about that, but you want to take a knee for George Floyd. It's some BS, man. It's some BS. And the other thing is, like, why everybody's concerned. This is what I was always kind of like raised like this, but I always say this to people now just because this is how I am. Anytime you see a bunch of people getting all riled up about something, I promise, especially if the government's allowing it to happen and allowing media coverage to just be so prevalent about a certain thing. I promise you they're doing something else. I promise you something else is happening behind the scenes. So now, while everybody was giving and donating and marching and singing songs and doing TikTok videos and everything else, now Black Lives Matter got to go under a thorough financial investigation because there's millions and millions of dollars that have been misplaced. But nobody was paying attention. So you was throwing fists up and buying T-shirts, but you weren't paying attention to what was going on. And then even on top of that, people being, I said this on, I put this on my Instagram, and I think I even put it on my Twitter. There was a Berean thought that I did that said, over the past 2 years, a lot of people have taken up protesting as a hobby. Stay home next time.
That's real.
Because that's what happened.
That's real.
There were people that were out there hitting the record button before they even got out of their car to just go going on Instagram Live and being out there and getting pictures and playing black songs and throwing your fist up. You can't tell. Wait, but then the cold part is, if I ask you why you out there, you can't really explain to me why. Okay, why are you out here today? Oh, because of George Floyd and police brutality. Okay, so why are you marching? To bring awareness. Okay, so, like, is there anything that you want? Well, yeah, we want police brutality to stop. Oh, okay, so you're marching for police brutality to start. And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, okay. So what if they don't give it to you? You go home then? And then and for the most part, it's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, okay. So you just out here to make noise. Because the whole point of a march is to advertise. It's the advertisement process of whatever your grievance or your agenda is. We have been taught and programmed now as Black people, especially since all of our leaders, our powerful leaders were knocked off after the Civil Rights Movement. During the Civil Rights Movement, it was you got education and organization out to everybody, and then you mobilized through a march. What we have now is people are quick to mobilize. They are not educated and they are not organized. So now you got all of these marches that every time BLM comes up or somebody's thinking about Black Lives Matter, they're thinking about a riot, they're thinking about this thing and that thing, because there's no organization. There's countless videos on the internet of, it's unfortunate, but it'd be like these white conservatives asking these Black Lives Matter college students, why are you out here? What do you believe in? And they can't give adequate answers because they just out there, because it's just energy and it's just noise and it's zeal without knowledge. So now you out there embarrassing yourself and the rest of us because you just want to be in front of a camera, but you don't know what you're talking about. So now, and this is kind of a sneak peek into a video I'm actually getting ready. I got an interview I got to do tomorrow on my show, but even after that, I got another video I want to do talking about how Black Lives Matter makes our job harder, especially as people that are social commentators that want to be like legitimate truth.
Y'all need to tune in on that, people. Check it out. What time can they check you out?
For the interview or for that episode?
For both.
So neither one of them are going to be live streamed, but they will be coming out very, very soon. Okay. We're looking at hopefully towards the end of the month, but I got an interview coming up with a very special guest. He's a mayoral candidate for Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I also have a city council candidate for District 7 that's also going to be running as well. So I'll be able to have some really good conversations with them and question them on a lot of things. And it might get a little bit dicey with this one, but I will be asking them specifically, like, what's your Black agenda for Black people here in the area? Because we make up here in Fayetteville 43% of the population. Wow. So we're actually the big ethnic group here. Wow. So if you don't have a Black agenda, you're telling the 43% of the people in this county to kick rocks. Man, and that's a problem for me.
I'm definitely tuning into that. That's going to be a great episode. I think that's definitely, that needs to be put on a platform for sure, an independent platform for sure, because there's not enough people asking the real questions, you know, for people that are actually trying to make a move politically, economically, these kind of things need to be discussed. Because if you're going to be taking up all these votes, you got to see who you're representing and who's representing you. Face the man, Berean Talk, end of the month, y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned. Subscribe to his channel ASAP. Also a special shout out, man. Absolutely, that's automatic. That's feed the people, brother. Feed the people.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with out here. It's everything's not cool. Everything ain't sweet, you know. And I think this is the job that you and I have is kind of like the watchman on the wall. It's like we got to blow the shofar right now. You got to blow the trumpet and wake people up, because it's not. We're not at a point where everybody can be chilling. We have people that are going around saying peace, peace. There is no peace right now. People need to understand, like, this isn't like doom and gloom prophecy or anything like that. It's just kind of like, okay, I can look at scripture and then I can look at America and I can look at what America's done. It's over. America's done. There's no Nineveh moment here. There is no, and that's not to say that God isn't a God of repentance. And I'm not saying that individual Americans don't have the opportunity for repentance and the gift of salvation, all that. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about America as the empire, America as the entity. That's over. And it's because there's sowing that has happened over the last. America's been around for 246 years. The last 246 years, you've been sowing a lot of seeds, and everything hasn't come to harvest. And that's the scariest part about this thing. It's interesting how there are a lot of things that are happening to America. Really want to think about that. They don't want to think about the fact that you've been able to benefit off of all this wickedness. You don't think that there's a price to pay for that? There's spiritual law that happens here where if you engaged in something that was anti-Christ and you were able to get wealth and status and power from it because of the way that things work, right? So when you get a stronger connection to the Most High and you do different things, you got to make what? Sacrifices, right? So there's blood that sometimes needs to be shed, or there's a meal offering and different things. Satan works the same way. There's a sacrifice that needs to be made. So you got these satanic practices of these black codes and Jim Crow and terrorism and all of these horrible things that were happening in American society. And it seemingly seems like for a lot of people, they got away with it, or, you know, they just died and were able to pass on the wealth. But that's dirty money, though. That's money with blood on it. There's a cost for that. And it may not come back in the generation you think it should, but the Most High is sovereign. He creates the universe the way that he creates it. It's very interesting how.
But we're going to try and get this show moving along until he can find a way to get back. I'm going to see if everything's okay with him. Everything cool? In the meantime, y'all, we can show you some videos that he was talking about, mentioning earlier. Huge shout out, Under Evil Live, on Ev Live. I see you, brother. Telly Tell. Definitely another channel I subscribe to. And y'all check them out, man. We was actually just talking about these subjects the other day. Shoot, we were just talking about these subjects the other day. And it was a very interesting situation. Here we go. Yeah, it just dropped. Okay. You.
Oh, yo.
Uh-oh.
I think it stopped on us.
We're back on. All right. Woo. I was gonna have to pull out some videos on him. Like, all right, guys. Well, here's clip number 1. Man, welcome back, brother. All right. Please continue what you were saying.
Man. No, I mean that's kind of the gist of what I'm saying is that a lot of people just need to understand that what we're seeing now isn't that complicated. In terms of, like, I'm not saying that it's not hard to understand, because a lot of this information, like, it's a lot stuff happening with Russia, stuff happening with this, stuff happening with that. I'm not saying it's not a lot of information, but I'm saying if we're going to look at this objectively, like, okay, what is this really? Let's boil it down. What is this really? It's reaping and sowing. That's it. If you look in the Bible and you can watch how, like, certain things would happen in one generation, and then you would see it affect a whole nother generation because that thing wasn't finished its cycle. So think about it like this. David sleeps with Bathsheba, right? I'm going somewhere with this. David sleeps with Bathsheba. Bathsheba ends up having a miscarriage of the baby. But also, David also has her husband killed in order to cover it up, right? As a punishment, God says to David, the sword will never leave your house, right? Regardless of the repentance. See, a lot of people need to understand this. Just because you repent doesn't mean that that there's an absence of consequences. A whole nother conversation. But David repents, and he goes on to live his life, and he's considered a man after God's own heart. But 2 and 3 generations after he's gone, and even longer than that, his children were still killing each other. Why? Because of something he did. Because of what was spoken over him and his family. So for somebody to think like, okay, so you come from generations of people that up until a certain point were participating in or just observing and not doing anything about like lynchings and bombings and burnings and human trafficking and all these other things, right? But you one of the good ones that, okay, I don't own slaves. Got all the money from owning the slaves, but you don't own the slaves. You don't think there's a price to pay for that eventually has to like be paid? That there aren't certain debts that are kind of in the universe, so to speak, that don't have to be fulfilled? That's how this works. Yeah, exactly. Back in blood. Like
Back in blood.
It's like people thought that it was like oh, okay, it's a song or whatever, but like that's these people don't understand. That stuff is spiritual. That stuff is real. About the concepts of restitution and blood sacrifices and doing this thing and all of these different things. Like this is it goes back to the book.
This is how deep it gets, man. You're right. And like the concept of debt and universal structure and universal balance, like these are all things that don't, like this is where we bridge the gap between spirituality and economics, because economics, again, they had the Temple of Saturn as their treasury. That was their treasury. There's a very spiritual and ritualistic practice with banking, with lending, with creating money, with creating assets and values and all these different concepts of wealth and poverty. This is a very spiritual power. Justice is a spiritual power. Wealth is a spiritual power. And mind you, they've manipulated the entire country into jumping into $30 trillion of debt.
Listen.
We cannot even fathom one. And when I tell you these chickens are coming home to roost.
Man, listen, here's the thing, right? I've been saying this for like a few years. They are willing to do anything. I mean, I kid you not, they're willing to do almost anything except give us reparations. Like they like, think about it like this, because I remember I was saying this to people for years. Like, so if we were to actually do reparations, it would be about just like as a down payment, just to get started, because we would need more than this. But you're talking about 17 trillion, right? Now, of course, that sounds like a lot, but then when people realize that we were asking for reparations for years and years and years, and they said it was too expensive, and then all of a sudden there was a worldwide pandemic, and then they were like, "Oh snap! We found like a couple trillion between the couch cushions. Here you go." And it was like, "Well, wait a minute. We had been asking for that. Like, what? Where were you?" And then they sending billions to Afghanistan, and then they selling billions to Israel.
When they're giving out free money, you know it's over. When they're straight up saying free money, it's over. Free money, y'all. Just here, every month stimulate that bit. When they start stimulating the people, it's done. That's it. It's a wrap.
That's a fact. And they giving out land grants, and then they almost gave, and I think they're still thinking about doing it, the 450,000 to illegal immigrants. And now there's rumors, and I got to recheck on this, but like even like the money going towards what do they call it? A racial equity with providing drug paraphernalia. Like, nah, but I would just say it like this. I like all that being said is like you got to understand that this is on purpose. This is on purpose. And I don't know, and I'm willing to show anybody whatever they need to see, whether it's in scripture, whether it's in history, legislation, or even in the way that some economics works. I'm no economist or an expert by any means, but I got enough information to know that what I believe is the truth. So when I say these things, I don't say it lightly. But we got to understand that, like, it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, but if you haven't, it's definitely a book that everybody needs to go read at least once. And one of the things that that book talks about is like how dangerous it is to underestimate your enemy. That's one of the most dangerous things that you can do is underestimate, to think that they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we got it. To have an underestimated view of your enemy and an overinflated view of yourself is one of the worst, most detrimental things for you, because you won't prepare for the battle that's ahead correctly, which is why you got people out here saying you need to get an LLC and you need to do this thing and invest in Bitcoin and do this, this, and this. And it's like, for black people, when it comes to especially this economics game, your LLC is not a business. It's a tax ID. Okay. It doesn't mean that you know how to manage money. It doesn't mean that you have a customer base. It doesn't mean that you have a product. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that when you start getting money, Uncle Sam knows how to find you because you got an ID for that. But that's it. Real businesses are able to, like, it's cool to start a small business. I've been a small business owner myself, so I'm not knocking people that are entrepreneurs. That's not what I'm saying. But black business right now, because we're competing with white money and we don't really understand what white money looks like, you can't compete with, like I said before, you can't compete with the Rockefellers with a candle business. I'm sorry. You can't compete with the Bilderbergers with a food truck. I'm sorry.
You're being real. I mean, it is what it is. It's a hell of a fucking competition right there. I mean, business is a competition. It's war. You're right.
It is. It absolutely is. But what I say to people is this: black business right now, it is a survival strategy. It is not a freedom strategy. I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that and can pull out numbers and different things on this, that, and the third.
No,
but
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartly.
I can show you what our net worth is. I can show you what the Federal Reserve says about the racial wealth gap. I can show you what what different government entities say about how only 7% of black businesses have 10 or more employees. We're not owning and the heads of and controlling like the Walmarts and the Targets of the world. That's not us. So in order for us to understand how we need to get our freedom, like we're not really free like we think we are. There's a song by Brother Ali, and like at the end of the song, it says, "Custom made will come soon," or was it? "Come soon through new. They keep saying we're free, but we're all just loose." So it's this illusion of freedom that we've had, where we just think that like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm free because I'm able to get a Benz or a Bentley or this or that or that. I know people that have lived in a trailer-like home, white, that are worth more than people living in a $250,000 house that are black with a degree.
Look at what's his name, Warren Buffett. He chooses to stay in a $30,000 small shack of a home somewhere out in the hills of Wisconsin or some shit, or Massachusetts, some random, one of them random Midwestern states. And he's just kicking it, even though he's like worth well over, I mean, his portfolio at one point was, if not, I'm sure it's still at something about 4 or 5 billion, maybe more since the pandemic. I haven't checked on his shit lately, but I mean, dang, like to add to your point, that's all I had to say.
Nah, I mean, yeah, right. It's just no. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to just kind of think about that in such a way where it's like, okay, I think we can do this because all we got to do is you gotta flip this and stack this and stack this and flip this, and it's like, and then here's another thing that people don't, and this is, and shout out to Miss Yvette Carnell and Mr. Antonio Moore, the founders of the ADOS movement, grassroots organization that I'm proudly a part of. But one of the things they talk about is that politics is about timing, right? So just because there are certain things that our grandparents were able to do in like the 50s and the 60s and the 70s that you cannot do now. It don't work the same way now. Money doesn't move the same way now. You can't just up and start a business the same way that you used to be able to in the 40s. It's a different climate. You used to be able to now, or not now, but back then, you used to be able to get a decent factory job paying, some sort of a middle income wage. And you could go and get a car, get a house, paid off eventually. All of these different things. Right now, you could have a job that's paying you 50 grand a year and still got to Uber and DoorDash just to make ends meet. It's a different time. So for people that are like, this is why a lot of people don't talk about this. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, black people get money, we get money, we get money. What we don't also talk about is the little bit of money we do have. People don't know this. 75% of black wealth is held by the baby boomer generation. So millennials.
I'm glad you're paying attention. You know what time it is. Thank
you. Right. So my parents, millennials, and then Gen Z, God forbid Gen Z, which is me, we don't have anything. We don't. And what's happening in America now is that, especially with the racial wealth gap, even amongst like different age groups, like white kids are doing much better in my age group than I am. But then the other wild part is that the United States of America is about to have the greatest wealth transfer in the history of this nation. The boomers to the next generation, because those were the people that were during that giant economic boom, during getting stuff from the getting money from the GI Bill and all of the industries that were being built and all the wealth that was accumulated during that time, which also happens to be the same time that we were locked out of building wealth. It's about to get transferred to their kids and their grandkids. And what do you think they're going to use it for? What happens when, because they make up the majority?
New slaves.
Yeah, exactly. What happens when, okay, now we got to raise prices because, we got to be able to accommodate for this amount of money and influx of wealth that's coming in for all these people, right? We're going to not be able to afford to live in the America that we built. We're on a cliff economically. And a lot of people don't understand that, which is why like even illegal immigration, it affects black people because they come in and replace us. You get, and I've had this happen to me personally. This isn't about xenophobia or being anti-immigrant or anything like that, but this is just money talking, right? I've been in situations where, and this happens all the time, where black people could be at a particular company or in a particular area or industry where they should be demanding like $20 an hour. But you got some immigrants that came from Honduras that are willing to work for 12. If I'm the business owner, I'm willing to pay 3 people willing to work for $12 an hour than I am willing to pay the black people that's been loyal to me $20-something an hour, because the immigrants, they coming over here with nothing and starting from scratch, and they're getting government benefits and everything else to be able to start the American dream. Black people on average have debt from credit cards and student loans and everything else, because the way that wealth works in America has been kind of just period. You either inherit success or you inherit failure, and black people inherit failure. So there's this illusion that black people start at ground zero, when in reality, we start in a hole. And every generation, that hole gets deeper until we get the restorative justice that we need in order to get that redress. But we don't have that now because we were told LeBron James made it to the NBA, because Colin Kaepernick made it to the NFL, that everybody's happy. It's 2, 3, 4. Let's just say it was 500 people out of 43 million people. The math ain't mathing for me, dog. The math ain't mathing.
You're breaking it down
like,
on a whole, man. You making it too easy for anybody watching right now. He's making this too easy to help break down on any level. what is going on and how this is affecting not just our pockets, but the American pocket.
Absolutely.
This is a racism thing, a classism thing, a generational wealth thing. And this is a strategy that they've developed because they're working with different resources. We're working towards survival. They're working towards building the next phase of owners.
You're absolutely right. And I think the most powerful thing about it, and I think what's starting to happen now is this is why, honestly, one of the most powerful events in American history, nobody really even talks about it, but it like changed the face of the nation, kind of how everything was gonna move. Which was the John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Because what a lot of people didn't realize was that was black people and white people coming together. White people were getting screwed over because of classism. Black people were getting screwed over because of racism. But what was funny was that they were both getting screwed over by the same people, which were the elites. And so when you end up with some white people not only going to war for themselves, but also willing to say, I'm willing to die for these people to be free. And you got black people raising up to fight for their own freedom, which we've always done, and don't let anybody tell you that we haven't. So you get something like that, that's powerful. Which is why racism got more reinforced even after that, because they were like, we can't have another rebellion like that again. But that's what it's looked like it's starting to happen here in the United States, is that black people, we've been known that we've been getting screwed over by the American government. White people are starting to wake up and smell the coffee a little bit, and starting to see on a bipartisan
starting to
level.
get it, yeah.
Yeah, and so now, if we get in a position now, unfortunately, this is when it gets dangerous, and the United States government doesn't want this. But if we're able to click up with these white nationalists, and I'm not talking about the Ku Klux Klan, I'm just talking about people that are just like, pro-America, and they're the coal miners that are getting screwed over because of, things happening with wages and the medical care industry and all this other stuff. If you're able to get the Black Panthers to click up with the coal miners, you can't stop that. Because now we're going to be both in the White House mad at the same person. We're both going to go to the Senate mad at the same people. We're going to go to the city council meeting mad at the same people. If we're in a housing crisis, and you have nationwide, including Fayetteville here, got an impending eviction crisis of black people and white people all about to lose their homes, black people disproportionately, but black people and white people about to lose their homes, we're all going to be mad at the same people that have been taking advantage of us during a time that was traumatic, and during a time when we were told, you got to shut down, you can't provide for your family because it's law, but you still owe this money. Everybody got hit with that. And by the time we wake up and kind of smell the coffee on that one and start coming together and understanding who the real enemy is, because they want us to keep filming videos of the next barbecue Becky and the Karens at Target or whoever, because that's that little stuff that's that you can get easily distracted with,
just dumb petty
be
shit,
fighting on Facebook about, and not realizing that y'all both arguing in Target or whatever, but don't realize the dude that owned Target is the one screwing y'all over. I've watched people in big retail companies, I won't say who because I don't want to mess some stuff up for me, but I've seen people that I've worked with in large retail companies. Somebody is a staunch Trump supporter and somebody is a staunch Obama supporter, and everybody's talking and arguing about what they think should be done with the country and economics and everything else. And I'll be the one that be like, you and me all can't even make $15 an hour. How about we deal with that first? We all got the same problem, and it's being caused by the same person. So you want to argue about abortion rights. You want to argue about the Second Amendment. You want to argue about racism. You want to argue about this, this, and this. But all three of us in this conversation can't afford to put food on the table because of the same people. Why don't we come together on that? America don't want that. They never have, because the people that put that stuff together, those are the people that they decide to take out. But when I read my Bible, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the earth. And being a peacemaker doesn't mean non-confrontational. It means that if the final outcome is peace, that doesn't mean by necessarily like the ends justify the means. I'm not saying that, because the Torah gives us stipulations for how we're supposed to move to get to the destination. Absolutely. I got that. But if my goal is to create peace, if my goal is to seek justice and to love mercy, then that's what I'm going to do. and I'm gonna work with whoever I need to in order to get that result. Because when people think about this, like we always say, your kingdom come, your will be done. Do we know what the kingdom looks like or what it's supposed to look like? Do we know what the characteristics of somebody that is kingdom minded is supposed to look like? And when we figure that out and get rid of this church garbage or the Christianity garbage or the crazy Judaism garbage or whatever, and we just get back to just following the word rather than religion, things will look way differently, which is why you're seeing this mass exodus out of organized religion. But there's a lot of people that still worship the God of Israel. They're just seeing corruption in man-made systems. That's what we're seeing with the government, seeing corruption with man-made systems. And people are waking up and finally wanting to fight back, which is why you have the truckers, doing protests up in Canada. That's why you have, all of these different things happening, because everybody's waking up in their own respective right and realizing we're getting screwed over. We don't care if it's Trump. We don't care if it's Biden. We don't care if it's an R or a D or an I. We just know whoever is sitting in Caesar's palace, in Caesar's seat, you the problem. So now we got to get to work. And that's it. That's all it is.
That's as clear as it gets. And honestly, there may be some hope with politicians being able to work for us and not against us. I think there is the possibility of having that help, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're right. Peace is the objective at the end of the day, and by any means necessary, but not by, the ends justifying the means type of deal. I completely wholeheartedly understand that part, because it's like there's going to have to be, a level of disruption if the system is going to shake down the way we need it to work properly. It's designed to work one way, and we're asking for it to work another, and that's counterintuitive to the powers that be. And I mean, they already have their hands gripped in damn near everything. So it's like, that cause to me is an effort that we could definitely use some help on, getting more engaged, like how you're doing on your show. I can't wait to see your episode, and getting just to see what dialogue looks like with people that are sitting in more reachable aspects, some productive outlets. Because tearing down a building, they doing shit when half of those buildings are black-owned businesses, or it could be somebody's, who has nothing to do with that situation getting destroyed and destroying your own infrastructure and destroying everything that's going on that's supposed to help you. It's counterintuitive. And if we're working in ways that are productive with our local politicians, and working in ways that are productive with our community, we'll find the answer. And we're gonna have to man up a little bit when it comes to what we're willing to die for again, because again, this is going to turn into something once properly organized and genuinely organized, not corporately funded and all this, nothing with any heavy interest weighing on one side too many, because the world that we're trying to build is a world that actually makes sense and is justified, with common sense and with scripture. And there is a huge pushback when it comes to how we're going to approach the grand scheme of things, because on a local level, yeah, we can get things done and we can start spreading little pockets, but the depth and the severity we're at now is far beyond, just some political movement. It's definitely going to help ride the wings. It's definitely going to be the air under the wings for it, but we're at war. That's just what it is. And we need to be on a warlike mindset and understand all aspects of warfare, because war doesn't always have to just necessarily be a live fire war. And war is, in most cases, psychological, which is essentially what you could say we're doing now, because this is considered, again, speaking freely about subjects like we're talking about, questioning things that are going on with our government, is now considered a domestic threat. Now, am I advocating for us to go down and physically burn things down? No, absolutely not. I don't think that's our fight to fight. We have some power behind us, and that's why, again, these are conversations that are going to have to be, discussed over time, because the concepts that are being brought from a biblical standpoint aren't going to make sense at this time, because having to explain things that were seen in a time before English was even written, even a concept, having to explain that and translate that properly in today's day and age,
yep,
is a trip. We might have to designate a whole segment just for that conversation, because there is some secret sauce behind this. It's not really secret, but he's got some juice, Y'all really has some power behind him, and it's not like he's on some fairy tale, in your mind in the afterlife type stuff. Like, he's got some.
That's real.
You see what I'm saying? Like, he's here to fight too. Like Moses himself said, our God is a God of war. He made that abundantly clear, and he made that clear to the Egyptians. He made that clear to the Sodomites. He made that clear to Israel themselves. He made that clear to the whole world. And what does that clarity look like? It's going to take time to make sense out of it, because we're having to break down a lot of philosophical concepts, occult concepts, celestial concepts, world history, politics, pagan worship, all these different concepts that are tied into who Yahuwah really is, and why these nations stand out, and why these nations got what they got, and why we're at where we're at today, and how we're going to get back. Because we think that this return to Jesus, when I mentioned on the phone to you earlier, we had this conversation about the rapture, and how this is a prevalent thought in Western Christian thought, that we're all just going to disappear out in the sky when all hell breaks loose. And it's a sad thought to have, because clearly they're just believing in fairy tales and believing in a narrative that was developed in the 70s by the Western church. This is not a common idea in the Bible. People like to quote that one verse in First Thessalonians, about how in a twinkling of an eye we'll be caught up in the air together with the Lord, and that's it, right? That's what the scripture says. Oh, we'll just disappear. All of our problems will just disappear. We'll just go away. Nah, it says at the last trump. And the last trump don't sound until the last trump sounds, after all the other trumpets sound. And every other one of them trumpets, they keep getting worse and worse, and we're going through all that. And the beast will have the power to make war against the saints.
Start pour it out.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not about to disappear from none of this shit. And if anybody does disappear, it's probably from the fake ass, we might be dabbling in the realm of conspiracies, but CNN did report that they had some UFOs and aliens running around the sky.
They've been like, that's been proven that stuff is like that happens. I just feel like at the end of the day, right? What has been will be again. There's nothing new that's under the sun, right? So this is why I kind of say, like, people kind of think it's like this is why the Bible is so brilliant, because it talks about how the Word of God, it doesn't change like the shifting of the shadows. It's not limited by time, which means that I can go in Scripture and find explanation for all this stuff that's happening right now. I can figure out, okay, why is America the way that it is? Why are these world superpowers doing what they're doing? Like, if I can get the information on what's happening right now, really get down to the root of the matter, get down to the bottom of it. And then I go to Scripture and then see all like, okay, what does y'all have to say about this? What is the rules of engagement for this? And it's like, oh, that's what this is? Oh, they've been doing this. You see it over and over again. That's why it's interesting, like, when you even go back into to Genesis, and even like I've been reading like Jasher and Enoch, and you look into how even like Egypt operated, or how Rome operated, and you see these weird similarities between them and America, and not good similarities. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we've seen this before. We've seen what this looks like. We've seen, like, even in Ecclesiastes and Solomon talking about, these different forms of oppression, and watching the fatherless being taken advantage of in the court of law, and the widow and everything else. And it's like, wait, we see that now. It's been happening. People have been wicked since forever. So when you understand that, and understand, like, this ain't nothing that we haven't seen before, just as a human race. And then also, in the words of one of my favorite rappers, Odyssey, what is there to fear? I'm from Black America. It's just another year. You knew the disrespect by your elected puppeteers, but let me show you how to persevere, right? So he's sitting there talking about, like, for Black America, especially a lot of the stuff that's happening now. You had everybody freaking out about Trump and this, that, and the third. Everybody, oh my God, that's the worst thing ever. It's like, bruh, we made it through slavery and Jim Crow. Like, we'll be okay. It's the Caucasian folks that are kind of new to this whole politician getting up there, disrespecting you, robbing you, treating you like garbage, abusing all these different things that it was like you kind of felt like it didn't really happen to you. But now you're being what, as Dr. Cornel West would call it, niggerized. And when any human being gets niggerized, there is a response, a natural human nature response to that everybody has. And it causes you to do things like storm the Capitol. It causes you to do things to be angry and fight for what you think you're losing and everything else. Because to be niggerized is to be dehumanized, is to have, your identity stripped from you, your wealth stripped from you, your power stripped from you, all these different things. And anytime America has been made to feel like that, they always respond with how what's considered the average human being should respond, which is violence, which is self-defense. Every time America gets niggerized as a nation, ergo 9/11, ergo, all of the Pearl Harbor and different things. When America is made as a nation to feel vulnerable, to feel taken advantage of, to feel violated, to feel unsafe. That is what it's like to be Black in America. And when they're made to take a taste of their own medicine, when the chickens come home to roost, they don't like that. So that's why it always talks about what you put out there will come back to you. It always will. It always will. So this is like,
we had somebody comment. We had somebody comment. Jack. His username is Jack something. He said that's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyone can find patterns if they are looking for them. I don't know what you mean by that, Jack. You might have to elaborate on that comment. But I heard you mention some things, Christian, that might have answered his question as far as self-fulfilling prophecies go, because yes, everything does come back to people. So please continue.
No. I mean, I kind of agree with the point. Yeah, it is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's kind of like when the way that kind of like the universe works is like when you started putting certain things into motion, regardless of whether or not you meant it or not, or did it on purpose or not, or were aware of it or not. There's something that was put in place in the universe for there to be a 360 motion for that joint to come back to you. So now we're seeing it with America, and it looks ugly and it looks horrible and just it's gross. It's gross. And it's funny because America, just as she's always been, is having her shame, so to speak, exposed, and the whole world is seeing it. There's the I want to say it was Iran. I think one of the prime minister of Iran wrote either a letter or article talking about how police brutality against Black Americans in the United States is considered a human rights violation. And basically, he's like, listen, America, y'all was talking about us and all the stuff that we doing, but what you got going on over here? We watching people getting choked out on video camera, and they got to be having protests in order to get them arrested. Like, what y'all got going on?
Mm-hmm. Didn't they actually take that to the UN, and they found the U.S. guilty of human rights violations? Did you ever hear about that?
They've been done that. According to the Geneva Convention, we could nail them on crimes against humanity just for us specifically.
Yep.
Right now, with genocide and all the things that they've done with population control with us, and the conspiracies that they've been involved with Planned Parenthood and all the prison industrial complex and everything else. Like we could. Oh no, that's easy to do. The problem is, are we going to actually be able to do that? But like, kind of like what was mentioned, like kind of what you were talking about before, like when we sit there and you kind of just look at it, right? This is what I kind of like to do with my audience, like all the information that I'm giving and everything else, even though some of it is kind of like things that people haven't heard of and different things. I try to make it simple because that's how I think. I'm not doing this so I can, hey, I want everybody to see what I see or know what I know. I do it in such a way because these particular subjects, especially when you get into like Black history and politics and different things, they're either considered boring and dry subjects, or they're considered intimidating because it is a lot of information. So what I try to do is present it the way that I like it presented to me. Is like, okay, I need you to be candid, but I also need you to be factual, and I need you to be objective about your presentation to some degree. Now, I'm not going to be as objective because, I am part of the group that is oppressed. So there's going to be parts of it that I'm going to add my own spin to it. But I try to be objective as possible. So when I try to do that and try to make it simple, it's not because I'm trying to cater to the lowest common denominator because like, oh, no, you won't understand this. It's just like, no, we don't have to make it this complicated. This is what it is. This is how it works. This is all that's happening. So somebody will sit there and explain to you like, oh yeah, well actually this means this, this, and this. And when you break down these numbers, it's like, no. Let me just break it down. You have no money. This is where I can show you have no money, and I can show you who has money, and then I know that you know they have money because you've seen it, and you know that you don't have access to it. You think you do and you don't. And it's just that simple. And like I said, a lot of my political education, of course, it came from my parents, me being able to be a homeschool student, but also, again, shout out to the Breaking Brown show and Tone Talks, and a lot of the political education I got over there, and the resources I've gotten, and the reading and the studying I've been able to do, to be able to candidly break this stuff down, because that's the responsibility really of a leader, right? So like even with what you do with your show and talking about a lot of these very interesting and complex topics, the point of it isn't to say, hey, look at me, look at all the information I have. It's, okay, listen, I know the average person isn't going to go research this thing on their own. I'm going to go research this, bring this information to you. Then I'm going to tell you why you need to be paying attention to this information. And I'm going to tell you in such a way that you can regurgitate this information and understand the concepts you need to understand.
Exactly.
For the purpose of making sure people are aware and know about the truth. That's it. Because neither one of us really care. This ain't about the cameras. It's not about the spotlights. It's not about the microphone. It's about speaking truth to power and making sure that we are doing our part of what we feel being called to do. And we feel called to be voices to and for our people. So in order to do that, you got to make sure people are educated, and you got to make sure you're connected with people. So like on a regular basis, I try to make sure that I'm not just some guy talking about politics all the time, but I want to make this stuff relatable. Me bringing up stuff about the Federal Reserve and everything, it doesn't make sense to most people if I'm just throwing out numbers and different things. But if I could tell them, hey, the reason that you work at McDonald's and do DoorDash and got another part-time job, and somebody else who is a different color is in the exact same situation, but somehow they're able to make payments on a house, and you still renting out an apartment and got crazy amounts of debt and don't have access to land and wealth, but somehow these particular people, they had a grandmother that was able to put up some land for collateral to pay for tuition and different things. Like when you really get to understand that stuff and you really be able to see like, no, this is real. It affects you right now. For me, it feels good for me because it's like I've done my job. I made it real for you. And now the next part, and this is what a lot of people don't want to do, which is what me and you talk about. What are the solutions? So when I talk about the quote unquote doom and gloom of the Black community, I'm not just sitting there like, well, all right, everybody kick rocks because like this is it. I go, no, the solution is reparations. Now it sounds like this dramatic feat, but when I break down to you what's been taken from us, and I break down to you what exactly we need, and when I break down to you what reparations could do because we know what it does for other people, then it becomes real for you. So this isn't some like, and then on top of that, that's what the civil rights movement was about. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about right before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. He was on a reparations campaign. He said, when we go to Washington, we're coming to get that check. They didn't talk about that right before Malcolm X was killed. He was talking about an economic revolution when Marcus Garvey and Fred Hampton and like go down the list. When they start talking about the money, that's when somebody got to take them out. It's every single time. There's a reason for that. And that's because the United States only understands two languages, and that's violence and that's money. Because you can watch how they react to when violence is committed against them or when their money gets interrupted, which is why some of the quickest things that happened in the civil rights movement was when an effective boycott was done because it hurts your pockets. It's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. And I'm not saying
let them know.
Let
them know. Break it down because people don't understand these concepts.
No. I mean, yeah, but it's not rocket science or anything like that. It's just like, listen, I want people to be comfortable with being able to dive into these topics and being able to say like, no, 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 no. What they've told you is for the bourgeoisie. What they told you is for people that are, have degrees or study this or have a political science degree and all that. It's like, no, it don't have to be all of that. It's right here. And I can help you break down. And my job as somebody that's supposedly screaming this from the rooftops is to break down the information even more and make the resources more accessible or tell you where to go get the resources, right? That's what the Bereans do. I'm hearing information, but I'm going back to make sure it's true. And then I'm verifying it. And then I'm telling other people like, yeah, I just went ahead and verified this. You can go back home and verify me, but this is what it is, which is why I've had conversations about reparations. And every time I have one now for the past couple of years, they never end with them being like, oh my goodness, Christian don't know what he's talking about because of blah, blah, blah. It's always this weird silence or maybe even anger displayed towards me because it's like, you don't have an adequate answer to say that we don't deserve what I've been talking about because I gave you all the evidence you need to know. And I know sometimes I know what you believe better than you do. So let's work together for the greater good. This ain't about punishing this group of people and that group of people. It's about collective uplift for, number one, my people, because we built the richest nation in the world. But number two, for everybody that's oppressed and disadvantaged and being taken advantage of, because there's plenty of white folks that I'm concerned about that get screwed over by the system as well. It don't look like what we go through, but it sure does suck. You know what I'm saying?
No, you're absolutely right, man. Economic castration, brother. That's something I got to see personally happen with a brother I know here in Chicago. My brother Carlos with Edit W and One Team, One Plan, One Brand. Him and his brother Cartel, they started this nonprofit, and they've been basically doing everything they can to support, minorities, minority kids and students on the south side of Chicago, essentially. And they got a lot of good things going with that. And one project they tackled last with One Team, One Plan, One Brand was they literally effectively applied that principle of economic castration on the Shell gas station because one of their employees acted up and beat up one of the women in the community. I don't know what the argument was about, what they were fighting about. There was a news report done on it and everything, but that happened like sometime last year. And wow. But he effectively every day and every night for 12 to 16 hours a day for a month straight, he went and protested and blocked traffic from coming into that Shell gas station and shut it down and basically had them, they were working a boycott essentially. And essentially they messed up their income so much that corporate had to come down and speak to them personally. They had to get investigated. At one point they got arrested. There was like a lot of, pushback on that over one store. Like, mind you, Shell is a multi-billion-dollar company and they got, state stores all over the place, but shutting one store down on the south side of Chicago got the attention of corporate. And what they were looking for was they were trying to bring private security, black-owned private security, to work at these gas stations that are considered dangerous so that they can take it upon themselves to protect their own community and also open up job opportunities. And, the dialogue that had to go back and forth between them to make that happen was damn near impossible. And, they had to get tried and all these different, court issues and blah, 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 blah. But I think they're coming out on top, and they're in a situation now where they're leaving a good mark on society and showing that they're fighting for something, and they're showing that through action. And one man, and really it was, a team of people. He's got a really good, group of people behind him and with him that are seeing it through, like what they got going on. And I'm seeing firsthand economic castration just off of one man effectively. There was people with him, but he did a majority, like he was doing a lot of work. He has video of every single day. The Shell is closed, people. Shell is closed. Is out there with his megaphone. Shell is closed, people. Don't let them do that to your sister. Da, 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 da. Like just running it down and effectively block people from coming in a legal way too. He did it in a way where it wasn't, crossing boundaries or da 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 da. Police had to try and it was. And he really blocked the money from coming in. So they got corporate attention, and it was just like, yeah, so we're gonna need y'all to stop. They paid off the mother allegedly, and got her to calm down the protest. And basically, the mother, the girl that got beat up, they basically asked him to calm all that down because things are good now. If I understand the situation correctly. And so he's like, damn, it's like that. Damn, I'm riding harder than you for your.
Well, yeah. But that's the power of like really getting organized. Like if you can organize and hit them in their pockets the way, like think about it like this, because we never, because we've been so almost politically castrated in so many ways from losing all of our leaders during the civil rights movement. We don't know how to do this as effectively as we used to. So, because when we had those things happen, right, you're able to do it in such a way where it's hurting the very system that's hurting you so much. But also, we had a bit of a stronger sense of unity back then as well, where we were able to say, all right, listen, we're going to educate everybody on the issue, and then we're going to make this move. We know it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit. Like when they did the Montgomery bus boycotts, they had to walk. Some of them had to walk more than they wanted to. Some of them had to do carpooling and different things, but it was like, listen, we're all committed to the same mission. So it's not going to work unless we all are a part of it and we all participate. I've thought about it like at different retail stores and different things where people are upset about pay and working conditions or whatever. The reason a lot of them can't unionize isn't just the fact that just like, oh, okay, they don't want to work together in this unity. It's also fear. Okay, if I decide to not come to work, then all they got to do, because it's just hundreds of people that work here, all they got to do is fire me. And I can't just do a strike on my own because it won't be effective because there's 30 people waiting in line to get my job anyway. But what if the 200 people that's in that location decide ain't nobody going to work until X, Y, and Z gets fixed? Oh, they can fire everybody in the store if they want to. Then what? You gonna fire 200 people overnight to run an entire store or something like that? But we don't have that anymore because people have self-interest and people have like even different tiers in management. They get certain benefits and different things. So now you got management that knows what's going on but don't really want to get involved because they got a sweeter deal than everybody else at the bottom. So now it's like divide and conquer. You know what I'm saying? It's the
Let me show you and the people this video. I hope you can hear it.
Teaching them years ago. You just didn't know. She went to hell years ago. They taught them compliance. They stopped teaching them to think. Those same examples just being used to track your children, to determine who's going to college, to train them, to support this God-forsaken system. All the rest that's going elsewhere. They have pushed us into prison. I don't care how you look at it. If you're in corporate America, you're imprisoned by your lifestyle. If you're in the government, you're imprisoned by your job with good benefits. You understand? If you are on subsidy, you're imprisoned by their benefits. We have to get out their system, pull yourself out, pull your dollars out, and level it.
What? The fire in her voice, bro. I was like, I felt, oh my goodness. Right on the head, bro. You was right on the head with that. I was like, that's why I had to play it, because you said it like literally verbatim. You said it just like, I was like, oh, my brother's on the same page, bro. Check this out. Oh man.
That's it. And it's funny enough, like, and shout out to and rest in peace to John Taylor Gatto, because he has a book that kind of goes very, very, very in depth with, especially with the education system and how much corporate America was tied to it in the modern day American education system, especially public school, and all of the things that went into like the programming and, like she said, taking analytical thought out and all these different things. Is in the book that he wrote was called The Underground History of American Education. And it wasn't a book about racism, but because American history is so real, he goes into the fact of all these, like some of these different racial disparities. He was considered the number one, or no, got an award for being the number one public school teacher in New York City, which is a really, really, really big deal. And he was the one basically blowing the whistle on the system till the day he died. So with her saying that, that's music to my ears, because it's like, that's exactly what it's all about. Like, you got to understand, which is like, it was so funny when people are like, oh my gosh, this country's going to hell and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I wrote and anybody that wants to check this out, you can go on my Facebook or my Instagram page and go find it. But I wrote like, it was almost like a short article when the Kyle Rittenhouse case was going on. And at one point in the article, I was like, listen, there was a lot of people going around like, if Kyle gets charged and that means the justice system is screwed over and that means certain things are happening and we've reached a threshold in America and we get, this is the point of no return. And I'm like, listen, if you think this, if you think if this case goes bad, it's over. Oh, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's been over. It's been over. That happened a long time ago. When people talk about like, oh, okay, God left, this nation when they took prayer out of schools. No. God was absent from this nation since its inception because it's satanic. God didn't leave, quote unquote, America because you took prayer out of schools. His presence is absent because in those schools, when you would pray in the morning, at 2:00, you would let those same students out to go watch a lynching. You don't want to talk about that. Said the Pledge of Allegiance and went and watched somebody get burned alive for being falsely accused for rape. As a pastime, right? That's what America did. So for you to now, when it gets uncomfortable and it gets a little warm for you to say all of a sudden that the system is like corrupt, it's like, sweetheart, you about 200 and something odd years late to the party. I'm sorry. Like, which is kind of how I felt, like, especially with like people that feel like, especially people that are more on the conservative side of the aisle that are Caucasian, because a lot of stuff didn't really hit them because certain elements of white privilege shield you from certain American realities. But now, because the way that white supremacy works, it even affects white people in negative ways, just like the prison industrial complex will sweep poor whites under the rug with us. So now that it's happening and a lot of people are waking up to different things happening and wanting to talk about things happening in the criminal justice system and how stuff is messed up there and how things are messed up with policing and how people, because didn't want to talk about police brutality. But then when somebody gets their clock clean because they didn't want to put a mask on in Walgreens, then it's a problem. But it's like I said again, sweetheart, you 200 and something years too late. Like it's been happening. But your silence in the midst of our pleading for justice has caused certain ramifications on you and the rest of the citizens around you is because you turned a blind eye to injustice. And so now that injustice has now started knocking on your door, and now it's a problem. Now we're all in this together. We're all heroes. We're all just Americans. We're all this. Oh, no. What happened to, well, what were you hiding? What happened to all of that, right? But now you're mad because the police are now going to start snatching your kids up when you don't start complying with certain elements of the state. But when they were doing it to us, it wasn't a problem. It was because we were drug addicts, because we were irresponsible, because we were violent, because we were gang members and all these other things. But now they targeting you. They're targeting you as terrorists. They're targeting you as enemies of the state. And you don't like that. But when it was us, you were participating. You were there with your pitchforks and your torches and everything else. And it's like, nah, like you reap what you sow. Them chickens got to come home to roost. And there's nothing that you can do about it. Now, the thing is, that's not to say that there can't be repentance. That's not to say that, you can't get involved in the fight now to start changing some things and reversing some of the things that you've been able to benefit from for generations. But just as we've seen in scripture, just because you repent don't mean that the consequences are now going to be absent or that there's somehow you're going to be relinquished from consequences, because then that makes God not just, right? Because if he's just, that means he has to do certain things because that's the law he put in order. Not because he's mean, not because he don't like you or because he does like you. It's because that's just it. And if we want to go deeper, if you want to go below what the rabbis would call the pashat level, if you want to take it a little bit deeper, you can also look at it like God disciplines those that he loves. So when you see that it feels like God is taking that time out to really like it feels like your butt's getting kicked a little bit extra and it feels like it's coming from a divine source, it also should be one of those things that's a bit encouraging, because it's like, okay, the Most High thought about me enough to say that I need consequences for this thing because he wants better for me or wants better for my people. Everybody talks
right
about
on the
like
head.
the quote. Everybody talks about the quote unquote Old Testament God and different things, but everybody wasn't getting their butt kicked the way that Israel got their butt kicked because there was different rules that applied. There's if I have a child, I don't discipline every child on the block. I just discipline my child because they know the rules in my house. Period. And if I discipline another child, that's because they in my space where I have jurisdiction and these are the rules here. But you go do whatever you need to do over there. But my kids, we roll this way over here. That's it. It's very simple. It's
Very
so
simple. Very simple, bro. In my house. You said it just like that. Whose house? Man, right on the head, brother. We done chopped it up, bro. We done. I mean, this is definitely hands down my favorite episode.
This is what we do, bro.
Man, like thus far, period. Man, and it's crazy because we have so much ground to cover still.
That's a fact, man. I thought about that too. I was like, oh my God, we did, man.
People, I want y'all to say we didn't even get started for real. This is how we warm up.
This is why we call it. This is the Sunday night special,
Oh, man.
You can only watch it right here.
Oh my goodness.
Exclusively.
I'm not keeping you up outside your time, am I? Like I'm not because I literally like this could literally end up going all night, and I'm having too good of a time to just be like, all right, y'all, that's it. So it's really it's on you. You gotta let me know what your situation is because I ain't trying to offend your time.
Nah, you're all good, but man, I mean, I think. I don't want to give away too much because if I get started, we gonna be here for another hour. But I would say that of course, as always, this is what it's all about. This is what we do it for. This isn't just about us just on here talking, but we facing the facts. And yeah, it's like kind of pun intended, but also just literally like regardless of whether or not you like it or not. These are the things you have to consider. These are the things you have to look at, regardless of whether or not you want to stick your head in the sand. We got real stuff happening around the world. We have real stuff that's happening right here. You have real things that are happening around the world and here that affect your life in ways that you don't realize, but you're suffering for it. So face the facts. And Berean Talk is all about bringing those things before you and saying, hey, listen. What they told you is this, but this is what's going on, and here's the evidence to prove that. This is what I love about our show so much, is that it's a very evidence-based show. We pulling up videos, we pulling up articles, we pulling up the data and everything else because it's about actually being informed. It's not about intellectual hearsay. This is about letting the people know, listen, this is what's going on, and if we do have solutions, we say this is how we need to move, or we say this is how the Most High said we're supposed to move, or we might be like how I was earlier, just like, listen, bro, I have no idea what's going to happen. I just know these are the things that's going on. Like I don't know what to tell y'all.
Transparent and honest. That's what you can expect out of us is transparency and honesty, because we're not going to sit here and bullshit y'all with any propaganda outside of what we know in scripture and what we've learned from the Most High. Like it ain't we ain't on no corporate dollar. We ain't on no corporate dime. I don't think anybody here is worried about a dollar right now. We're more worried about just getting the word out, because right now that's more valuable than a dollar anyway. So
that's a fact.
We're pushing the information the way it needs to move. We have a lot of things to cover, but do we need to save that for the next episode?
I think you know what? You're gonna have to come back for the next episode.
You're gonna have to come back to the next episode because
this have to come back because we got so much. We got so much for y'all.
Man, we ain't even touch on it, man. We
really didn't.
Oh my goodness. On the next episode, expect this, y'all. We've got some incredible news footage. Incredible. Like you wouldn't even believe it came out the news.
Appetizer, man. It's just giving you a little taste of what's to come.
Man.
We had like y'all don't see me me and this brother be talking. We be brainstorming, plotting and planning and such. But like when I tell you guys, we have so much on the way for you guys, individually, but also as a unit. Like stay tuned. Tell your folks, share the videos, like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Not only just because, it boosts our numbers or anything like that, but also just helps with that algorithm. And if this is something that you feel like you need other people to see, then why don't you, support what you love or support what you're interested in, and make sure other people are able to get that message. Because I feel like we're talking about some real issues. We're talking about some real things with some interesting and I say rather unique perspectives that a lot of people don't really have right now. And, hey, we out here. we are out here.
Plain and simple. We are out here. The truth is out here. The message is out here. The dialogue, the platform, the conversation is out here. We are out here. Man, we should just make that the bumper stick on in this video, man. We are out here. That's the slogan. Berean Facts. We are out here. We are out here. Let's go. All right, man. Look, thank you for coming on, man. This has been the most pleasurable conversation, dialogue, everything, man. Like, thank you for your input. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your information. Thank you for your platform. Just thank you for everything you contribute. Blessings and love to you and the family, to the wife, to the mother, to the father, everybody, man. Y'all, I pray that everything is going good for y'all this week, this month, everything. This year. I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to a lot from you guys. And I'm personally looking forward to the next episode, and I can't wait for us to get back together again next weekend. But I'll definitely be catching up with you throughout the week, just to get some topics and dialogue going and stuff like that. You know how we catch up. So that'll be on the table. But next Sunday, guys, I think we should aim for the same time around then.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. It's like I said, man, thank you for having me on the show.
That's automatic.
It's always, I always have a hell of a time just being able to chop it up with somebody that's like-minded, but it's also like that iron sharpening iron type of situation we got going on.
Yes, sir. I felt that for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is what it's all about. This is what we do it for. We're gonna keep pushing, and for the audience, for you guys watching. We hope you guys are enjoying it. If you have, your comments, you have questions or anything, of course, hit us up. And of course, Israel, my brother, always good to see you out here. See you with the Samson braids in. You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, I got a little length on him now. I got a little length. I see you with the locks too, man. I mean, I know you said you was just twisting them, but hey, once these all come out, once both of ours come out, it's gonna be curls on top of curls.
Curls on curls. You feel me? But yeah, man. I mean, of course, blessings and shalom to you, the fam, everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Guys, definitely tap in with everything that he's got going on. Not only the show, but even on social media, he posts different, news updates and articles and different things that even for me, it kind of helps me with my own research, just to see something spark my interest, even spark my own research journey, because I go down some rabbit holes in a minute. So with all that being said, guys, we appreciate you for tapping in with us. That's all we can really say, is that this has been Facing the Facts, Berean Facts.
Right,
actually.
It's Berean Facts now. Yeah,
special on right here on the Face the Facts Israel Negasi YouTube channel.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right. Shout out to the people watching. Thank you, and we'll tune in next time, man. Tell one team, one plan, one brand under evil, and everybody that tuned in tonight, we thank you, and thank you for contributing your comments and everything. We'll be looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Love and peace, y'all. Oh, one last thing. That's what I was gonna say before I end the show. Send some prayers towards the family, man. On my end, send some love this way, because I got some pretty upsetting news before this all started. Right before this started, actually, kind of caught me off guard. But send some love this way. Some prayers, some healing energy.
Absolutely.
We'll make we'll make sure that turns out to be all right. Other than that, man, everything's cool. Again, peace and love, brother. Till next time.
Same to you, bro.